Welcome to the enchanting world of Bella Brown's historical Western romance. I'm delighted to share this journey with you today. Before we ride into the story, if you enjoy these narrations, please consider subscribing to this channel. It's a small gesture that makes a big difference, and your support makes it possible to continue bringing these heartfelt tales to listeners everywhere, completely free of charge. Now find yourself a comfortable spot, close your eyes if you wish, and allow your imagination to travel back to the American frontier where adventure and romance await. This audiobook presentation features His Fearless Bride by Bella Brown, all rights reserved. Chapter 1. New York City, 1893, Eliza. The front door slammed back into the frame, the sound echoing throughout the large home of John Parrish. Eliza's eyes drifted closed, and she almost counted under her breath as she waited for her father to appear. She'd made it to 4 when the parlor room door swept open and her father's big frame loomed in the doorway. What was that? Eliza gave her father a smile when what she really wanted to do was eye-roll, sigh, and go back to reading her book, which was infinitely more interesting than the conversation they were about to have. "The front door?" she asked sweetly. John's bushy brow arched as he skewered his daughter with a look. "Don't try and be clever, Eliza. You know how it irritates me." "Sorry, Papa. And I suppose you sent another potential suitor on his way?" This time she did roll her eyes, the same pretty blue as her mother's. "Papa, he was as dull as dishwater with no spine and nothing even remotely interesting to say." "You hardly gave this one a chance either." "I don't know why you insist on trying to marry me off. I'm perfectly happy alone. I don't want to settle down. I want to live my life and try new things." Her father growled his exasperation. "Eliza, you are my only daughter. I am not going to be around forever, and I'd like to see you settled in a home of your own with a good man. It's not appropriate for a woman of good standing to prance through life alone and unaccompanied. Every single man whom you've been introduced to has been from a decent background, and they have a solid portfolio and can look after you." Eliza stood, her frustrations making her voice louder, so it echoed her father's. "And I cannot keep having the same conversation with you, Papa. I know that you have this idea of how I should live my life. You are my child. Of course, I want to see you settled. Virginia was right, you need more refinement." At the mention of her stepmother, Eliza's face darkened. She was convinced that her father's new bride hated her. "And how would she know when she's barely older than I?" Her voice dripped with sarcasm. John's eyes narrowed. "You will watch your tone with me, young lady. That is my wife and your mama that you are referring to, and as such, you will afford her some respect." Eliza's lips thinned, but she wisely held her tongue. For many years, it had been just the two of them and the many governesses to try to keep the wild Eliza tamed until Virginia had skipped into her father's life and his heart 2 years ago. She attended the finest finishing schools in Europe, and that, my dear girl, is where you're going. Her jaw dropped open. "You're sending me away?" "Yes." John's smile held no amusement. "You will learn to be a proper lady with the best training in deportment and manners that money can buy. And you will be out of my hair and someone else's problem because the good Lord knows I don't know what else to do with you." "But, Papa, I don't want to go to school. Europe, yes, I want to travel and experience life. I won't go. You cannot make me." "That's my decision, young lady, and you will become a young lady if it's the last thing I do." Do you think he was being serious?" Belle asked Eliza. They were sat in the drawing room. Outside, the day was dreary and cold. The fire snapped and crackled in the hearth, and Eliza watched as the flames danced their way over the logs. She shrugged, the action as despondent as she felt. "He seems pretty set upon the idea. Goodness knows, we've argued over the issue enough since he mentioned it, but he won't back down. I am to leave in the summer, to start the new term in October." There was once when she knew that she could always get her way with her father, but ever since he'd taken up with his new wife, he'd acted differently towards Eliza. He'd been firmer and less inclined to give in. "Of course, I blame Virginia. He's changed since he married her." Belle sent a nervous look at the door. "She might hear you," she whispered. "Who cares? He no longer wants me here. It feels as though I'm the reminder of my mother that he'd rather forget. It's like I'm in the way here now. I think that's why he wants to send me away. For reasons only known to him, it's like he wants to eradicate all traces of her. Or maybe his new wife does. I might be playing devil's advocate here, but is it possible that she wants to put her mark on this house too? Your mother was well known in the community, a true Christian, and very much adored by everyone who knew her. Virginia has big shoes to fill. Eliza looked at her friend and ghosted a smile that she was far from feeling. It's possible. She sipped at her tea and set the china cup down with a sigh. What am I to do? I don't want to go to a stuffy school. Can you imagine how boring the conversations are going to be? How to attract a man from 30 yards whilst balancing a book on my head? Belle smirked at the image Eliza's words created. I thought you wanted to travel, though. You would see some of Europe this way. Eliza flopped back into the high-backed chair and folded her arms. I want to be able to go where I want, not go to school, then travel back. She threw her hands up, and they slapped her thighs when she dropped them back down. Then I'll be expected to marry whom my father dictates, or who has the most money at that time. I'm sick of arguing with him over it. Virginia seems to make herself scarce when the subject comes up, and he just digs his heels in. You know how I detest the small talk when we're at parties, where women talk about trivial issues such as who is sleeping with whom. I could care less. To think that is how my father sees me is depressing. I want more, though I don't know what. Perhaps I should just leave, run away. Belle laughed then. Where would you go? You cannot travel as a lone woman. How would it look? Besides, you have no money of your own. Belle's reply only served to infuriate Eliza and to compound the feeling that her life was being dictated to her. She longed to be free from all of the constraints that people seemed to think that she should live her life by. But Belle was right. She had no means by which to live, as the small savings that were in her room hardly made up for the opulent home in which she'd grown up in. Then I shall live on the streets, a penniless pauper. Eliza folded her arms in a huff. I think you're crazy, wanting to leave all this behind. Belle indicated the room. You have everything you could ever want here. But I'll go from my father's house to my husband's house, where I'll be expected to have a family and then raise children of my own, in the same city that I grew up in, seeing the same faces. We live in a huge country, and I've never even left this city. Then go to Europe? Go to the school and see? No, Eliza rudely interrupted her. Don't you see? He just wants me out of the way. Maybe he wants to start a new family. Virginia is young enough to give him more children. She could even give him the son that he's probably always wanted. If they can get me out of the way, then they're free to live their lives. He doesn't care that it's not what I want. So what are you going to do? Eliza scrubbed her hands to her face. If she left, where would she go? Belle was right. She had no money and nor the means to earn any money. A small voice told her to just accept her lot in life and be grateful. But even that thought burned her enough to make her resist. I don't know. They both fell quiet, and Eliza looked at the fire once more, as her limited choices span out in front of her. She knew that she must sound like a spoiled brat to Belle, who was so excited at the thought of being a wife and getting married, but Belle hadn't been through the pain of losing a parent. Ever since Eliza had lost her mother, it had been the single driving force to getting more from life. Her mother hadn't traveled or done anything of significance with her life. That thought both scared and saddened Eliza tremendously. You could go the frontier? I've heard about women who meet men in a catalog. I believe there are even offices in the city which connect you with men looking for a wife. Eliza sat up and blinked at her friend. Just as Belle dismissed the suggestion with a wave, Eliza lifted a hand to pause the protest. Why didn't I think of that? I wasn't being serious, Eliza. Those adverts are for women who are destitute or widowed. You are neither. But it's an escape, Belle. Eliza's eyes lit up. One that my father would hate, and that would mean I could run away and not have to be homeless. One that means I would get to have a say. Eliza, it's a terrible idea. The trip alone is dangerous, and the frontier is known for being a lawless and uncouth territory. And what if your husband is a brute? You'll be miles away from anywhere, from civilization. Belle placed a delicate hand to her breastbone as if to steady herself. No, Eliza, forget it. And just like that, her mind was made up. Chapter 2. Onyx Peaks, Montana, 1893. Logan McKee stepped into the ranch house and stamped the snow off his boots. The warmth from the fire and the stove, a welcome relief after the chill from the Montana winter that he'd been out in all day. It was the clearing of the throat that drew his eyes into the kitchen. 3 pairs of eyes watched him from across the room. His dark brows met in consternation as he shrugged off his outer coat and vest, then hung up his hat. Logan stood with his hands on his hips. "Y'all look like you're having a committee meeting?" Jake set his fork down and grinned unrepentantly at his big brother. At least Saul, his ranch hand, had the good grace to look abashed. Susanna stood up and hobbled across to the stovetop, returning with a plate of food for her firstborn. "Here, have something to eat. We've been waiting for you," she told him as she set the plate on the table before dropping back into her chair with a groan. Logan did as he was told, but only because he was starving. The pregnant silence continued as he began to eat. When the 3 exchanged a look, he rolled his eyes. "Okay, out with it," he said around a mouthful of food. Susanna took out the folded piece of paper and slid it across to her son. Logan picked up on the fluttering of her hands and felt apprehension kick in. He set the fork down, wiped his hands on his trousers, and picked up the paper, opening it up. Just the first line had him tossing the paper back onto the table in disgust. "No," Jake chuckled. "Told you," he said to the room in general. "Now, son, before you start mouthing off." "Ma, I already told you. I don't need a wife. I don't know how much clearer I can be. I don't have the time nor the inclination. And I'm definitely not advertising for one. That's the end of it." "This isn't for a wife, as such," his mother said evenly. "Just a companion for you, Logan." "No, Ma," Susanna worried at her bottom lip before she spoke. "We already sent the advert." Logan stared at his mother for a moment. Then he pushed to his feet with a growl and stormed back out of the house. Annoyance still radiated off him in waves when Jake found him 10 minutes later in the stable. Logan had heard the tap shuffle of his brother's uneven gait and resisted the urge to help his brother close the stable door, as he could hear him struggling with the lock. Instead, he ignored him and continued to brush the coat of his pinto colt in long strokes. "We're only trying to help," Jake offered eventually. Logan's hands stilled and he turned to his brother. "Help with what?" Jake lifted a brow at the snarled tone. His twisted body bent as he leaned heavily on his crutches. "We're all worried about you. Ever since Maggie left." The dark brows crashed down again. "So she left me. Big deal. It's not like I had much choice in the situation. She loved another, not me. I've been through worse." Logan ignored the pang that his words evoked. He refused to allow the woman to have any more time in his thoughts. "Look, Logan, the truth is Ma needs some help. I don't think she's recovered from that bout of influenza last year." Logan turned his back to his brother and continued to groom his horse. He didn't like to think of his Ma as weak or needy. She'd always been strongly independent, fighting to keep the ranch after his father had passed away. "Ma is okay." "How do you know?" "You're not home with her. I am." Logan bit back the words that he wasn't left with any alternative to his lot in life. Jake had been born different from other boys. He'd gotten sick as a child and had been left with legs that were misshapen so that Jake had to use crutches to get about. "I can't help that," he muttered eventually. Jake's sigh filled the small stable. "I know that you can't, but try as I might, I am still a burden to her. The older she gets, the less she can do. She knows it and she hates it. We need to do something to offset that burden on her, Logan." Logan turned to look at his brother once more. "You're not a burden, Jake. You never have been. You can't help how you are. It's just the cards we've been dealt in life." Jake shuffled, holding his brother's steady gaze. "I know that Maggie left you because of me." Logan couldn't control the startled look that Jake's words evoked. "That's not true," he began, wanting to save Jake's feelings. "Sure, it is." Jake made a non-committal gesture and pulled a face. She didn't want to be stuck babysitting the crippled brother or to be tarnished with the same run of bad luck that seems to plague this family. That's why she chose to marry the general store owner instead. Logan contemplated disputing these facts with Jake. Maggie had made her reasons for leaving the relationship perfectly clear. It didn't help that he'd often seen her regularly when in town, usually with her arm linked with the mustachioed store owner. Those were the times that he hated living where he did when she sent him a smug look. Anger kicked glitter into his glare. She just did me a favor and showed me her true colors before I made a colossal mistake in marrying a woman who was so shallow you couldn't even dip a toe in there. Well, we can both agree on that issue. Look, we're not saying you should marry for love. I know that Maggie stomped your heart into the ground. With a catalog woman, you get to choose. Logan brushed the pad of his thumb across the spiky bristles of the grooming brush as he thought about it. Everything Jake said made sense. His mother wasn't right since she'd been put on her back by the flu last winter. Although Jake was mostly ambient, the doctor had warned that as he aged, his mobility would be lessened as the muscles atrophied more. He knew that his heart was closed off to love, as he couldn't picture thinking of another woman in the same way that he had Maggie, and yet he wanted to help his family. At the very least, it would be nice to have someone else to look at other than your ugly mug, Jake offered drolly. Logan's lips twitched. We should find you a wife, too. It was Jake's turn to scoff at his brother. And who is going to love a deformed man who can barely hold his own head up? There's nothing wrong with your head. Your brain is as swift as any banker would want. I'm not sure it's my brain that a healthy woman is after. A man who can keep a roof over her head and carry her to bed would be a start. I can't do either. Logan pulled a face. Sure, she would need the patience of a saint to deal with your pig-headedness. Jake laughed. We have to find someone for you first. Lure them here without letting on how much of a cantankerous old fart you are. Logan chuckled, dropped the brush on the floor, and then rushed at his brother, tumbling the pair of them into the hay pile stacked in the corner. When they walked back into the house a while later, with strands of hay clinging to their clothing and hair, Susanna cocked a brow at the pair but remained quiet. Logan walked to the table, where the advert was still sat, and picked it up. He read the words carefully, cringing inside. But when he looked to his mother, his expression was contrite. Jake was right. She had gone to look frailer, and he needed to think of his family now, not just his own needs. I'm sorry about earlier, Ma. This looks okay. Susanna eyed her firstborn. Finish your tea, and stop roughhousing your brother. You're two grown men. How am I meant to introduce a young lady into the house if you're both acting like children? When they both sniggered, she couldn't help but smile at the sound. Chapter 3. Eliza. Handsome ranch owner seeks wife in Montana. She must be of good health and heart, and capable of demanding duties required on a busy ranch. Competent with horses and animals. Rancher offers a good Christian home and hearth and has family members that require some assistance in daily tasks. He has blue eyes and dark hair. Looks of applicant unimportant. All applicants are considered on merit. Rancher asks for honesty and fortitude. Eliza had selected the first advert on the pile of the ones that were handed to her in the offices and had responded to it. The office manager had exclaimed over how quickly she'd selected, even checking to ensure that she was happy to continue before Eliza had paid the exorbitant fee. Truth be told, she wasn't all too concerned with where she went. She longed for adventure and change. She had no clue as to how fast the post worked, and the date that she was to leave for school loomed ever closer in her mind. You're competent with horses? This one is on a ranch? In the mountains? The man asked her again, eyeing her dainty clothing and small hands. She blinked at him, annoyed with his direct questions. How hard can it be? She quipped. She liked animals, and they seemed to like her. We don't offer refunds, he tried again. Would you like another flick through first? Eliza shook her head, her innate stubbornness making her dig in her heels. That is the one, she affirmed as she handed him her money. Her father would burst a button if he knew how much money she was paying to disobey him. When the manager made no move, Eliza arched a brow. Is there something wrong? He seemed to accept her decision and tucked her money away. No, Miss Parrish. Any replies will be sent through us and posted on to you, so I will need your address, please. Eliza's mind stalled. She didn't want her father growing suspicious of any unusual communication coming to the house. Can I collect it if you send a messenger? Well, this is most peculiar, he began, and Eliza could see how vexed he was. No matter, she said quickly and gave him Belle's address instead. She would have to remember to mention it to her friend. She concluded her business with him and left, feeling both exhilarated and anxious at having unwittingly pulled her friend into her tangled webs of lies. As she hailed a passing cab, she sat back and exhaled, wiping the moisture off her top lip with a gloved hand. With her gaze on the busy city streets, she wondered if she was truly cut out for a life of subterfuge after all. Why am I getting your mail? Belle hissed at her once Virginia had left the room. She reached into her purse and pulled out the envelope, handing it to Eliza as if it were scalding hot. It had only been 2 weeks since she had been at the offices in the city, and she stared at the envelope, excitement buzzing through her. It had seemed an interminable wait, and her mind had conjured up all sorts of fanciful scenarios thinking about the handsome rancher. I could hardly put my mailing address on it, could I? Eliza murmured. Papa is already acting suspicious of my behavior. What do you mean? I'm trying hard to be the dutiful daughter that he appears to want, though I seem to have confounded him more. Now, he's put me under more scrutiny than ever before. Then start acting normal, Belle said, her incredulous tone climbing. I don't want to be involved in this ploy. If my parents were to find out, I don't want to hazard a guess as to what punishments they would eke out. The two girls fell silent as a maid entered the room and served them tea. Eliza distracted herself by studying the envelope and the neat penmanship on it. They won't find out, Eliza said once they were alone once more. You shouldn't worry so much. I only need to send a few letters, and I'm confident I shall have the handsome rancher right where I want him. Belle shook her head. I wish that I had your conviction over such matters. Eliza's eyes twinkled. Shall we read it? Her friend sighed. Fine, but only because the curiosity will eat me alive if I don't. Eliza's laugh tinkled as she tore at the envelope and unfolded the paper. Onyx Peaks, she read to Belle, her eyes dancing as she looked up. Doesn't that sound exotic? I suppose. Eliza scoffed over her friend's recalcitrance and carried on. Dear Miss Parrish, ooh, that's a good start. My name is Logan McKee and I am 28 years old. She paused to look at her friend. That's a good age, I think. Young enough to have children. I don't think I could be with an older man. Gosh, that's... Eliza, just read the letter, Belle said sharply, before someone comes in. All right, goodness, you're just as bossy as my father sometimes. 28. He lives with his mother and his brother on a large ranch in Onyx Peaks. Oh, the town is a busy place with a train station that helps bring cattle to and from there, as well as carrying timber from the local sawmills. She read a bit more. He's looking for a sensible woman who can help with housework and with caring responsibilities for his mother and brother. She paused and looked up. Caring responsibilities? What do you think that means? Belle considered before lifting a shoulder. Read on. Maybe it says... Eliza continued her editorializing of the letter, where Logan explained that she would have to be able to run errands as well as keep the house in order. That he was an educated man and was looking for companionship in the hills. She got to the end and looked at her friend. What do you think? This is your decision, Eliza. Ask him what he means by caring responsibilities. Have you ever kept house before? Eliza glanced around the grand room and tried to imagine a place in the hills of her own. How hard can it be? It's just cleaning and caring and taking ownership of the household budget, not to mention shopping for the household. Surely the servants would do all of that, she stated, just as the door opened and John Parrish walked in. She shot her father a guilty look and pressed her lips together. Servants would do what? Her father narrowed his eyes as he looked at his daughter's guilty expression. What are you two talking about? Thoughts scattered out of her brain, and Eliza sent Belle a pleading look. Mr. Parrish, you know how us girls enjoy idle gossip. My darling papa says that women would have less time to engage in such activities if we were to read more. John harumphed. "I'm letting you know that your application for Switzerland has been accepted, and I'm now making arrangements for your travel. I have come to see if you would like Virginia and me to accompany you for the trip." Dismay filled her. She'd secretly hoped that her behavior change may have discouraged him from following through on his promise to send her away. She dropped her gaze and unshed tears, turned her voice husky as she replied, "Whatever you think is best, Papa." She missed his look of consternation, though his heartfelt sigh filled the room before he walked back out, slamming the door for good measure. The ticking clock was the only sound in the drawing room, and Eliza blinked as the hot tears spilled over the rims of her eyes. "Are you okay?" Belle asked her quietly. Eliza looked at her friend. Desperation filled her, and she felt frustrated that her father seemed to not listen to her pleas. She felt as if she was being discarded, like she was no longer wanted. "I'd best send the most convincing letter of my life to this handsome rancher because I am not going to that school." Chapter 4. Dear Mr. McKee, my name is Eliza Parrish, and I am writing to you regarding the advertisement placed in the Matrimonial Times. I would like to introduce myself. I am 18 years old, and I am in a desperate situation. My father has a new wife and is making way for a new family by getting rid of his old life, namely myself. My mother died when I was 4, and it's always been just the two of us. Recently, my father has changed, and now he wishes to cast me out, ignoring my pleas asking for respite, and he wishes to send me away from all that I know, away to a foreign country when I am yet to explore our glorious lands. I know that I am young, but I am educated, and whilst not experienced in the way of the worlds as some people are, I am eager to explore and to see a different way of living. I know that there are ladies who might be replying to your advert for a wife and companion, but I am being as honest as I can. I am healthy of mind and have a strong back. People tell me that I am the image of my darling mama with black hair and blue eyes. I should like to get to know you, but please know that time is of the essence, because my father wishes to send me away this summer. I do not wish to go, but instead, I wish to live a life that would suit my sense of adventure more. After all, life is not a dress rehearsal. Losing my mother so young has taught me this. In anticipation, Eliza Parrish. Logan read the letter for what felt like the 5th time that morning. He was sat astride his little pinto, the brim of his hat casting a shadow from the sun that blazed high in the sky, playing peekaboo with the fluffy clouds that were chased across it by the spring winds. He sucked in a lungful of the mountain air and contemplated why this letter, out of all the ones he'd received, had been tucked into his pocket that morning. Eliza hadn't said why she was being sent away. She wasn't trying to escape poverty or shame that she had mentioned. Some of the replies had seemed so desperate, yet hers was a different kind of desperation. She was running out of time. Jake had speculated that she sounded like a spoiled brat and a bit of a handful. Susanna liked a letter from a woman who had twin boys from Oregon and kept pushing the letter at her son. Yet, Logan still equivocated making a choice. Solomon, his ranch hand, rode up next to him. He glanced at the paper in his boss's hand and quickly averted his gaze, and instead stared out across the meadow they were currently in. "Fence is fixed. I sent the others on up the line, and young Benjamin back to go make a start on bringing in the stock into the small paddock." Logan nodded, folded the letter up, and put it away into his vest pocket once more. "That's good, thanks, Saul." A silence stretched out between them as their gazes rested on the horizon. "If it were up to me to choose," Saul spoke quietly, "you want a woman with a bit of a spark. It's tough living out here. Marriage can be hard, but being with a woman who makes you look inside yourself to try to be a better person for her is a good thing." Logan turned to his normally reticent employee, cocked a brow. "You know much about this?" Saul sucked on his teeth, sent another quick look to Logan. "Might be as I do. I'm not a saint, and she drove me crazy, but I never did forget her." And that was all he said as he clicked his tongue and headed for the open pastures. Logan frowned, trying to pick apart the cryptic words. He wondered if that was why he kept thinking about the young socialite over the widowed mother. Maybe he would write to her again, see where things lay between them. It was as she said, this wasn't a dress rehearsal. Strangely, this was something that his father once said to him when Logan had asked why his father had relocated the family from Idaho to here. He followed Saul and thought about what he would reply to the young Miss Parrish. Dear Eliza, I trust that this letter finds you in good health still. I have very much enjoyed writing to you over the past 2 months, and I thank you for your patience in allowing me to get to know you a little more. I know that you have assured me that you are capable of the physical activity that is involved in living on a ranch such as ours, and how to care for a house. I would like to extend the invite for you to travel to Montana and to be my wife. You may live here at the ranch with my family. You will have no cause to fear for your virtue, as my family is of good standing in the community. I have enclosed a postal order for your fare to travel out here, which should cover any expenses that you may incur. Please accept my offer and respond with your arrival date so that my family can arrange to meet you. Yours with hope, Logan McKee. Eliza had retired early to her room that night, citing a headache as a reason to miss supper, and so that she would avoid the intrusively nosy servants that her father employed. As she quietly selected clothing and some personal items that she wrapped in a carpet bag, she was struck with a melancholy that she hadn't expected. She tucked the bag under her bed in case anyone should peek in on her before bedtime, and she sat at her desk. As she brushed out her hair and slowly plaited it, she considered her reflection. She had sat at this dressing table countless times across the years and dreamed of a life far away from here. Now, though, as the reality of it loomed ever closer, she was filled with misgivings as well as excitement. The thought of not seeing her father again pained her greatly, even when she reminded herself that he was wanting to send her away. Still, she wasn't completely heartless, and she took out a sheet of paper with her pen and ink well. As the gaslight cast a warm, buttery glow across the page, she drafted a letter. My dearest Papa, by now you will realize that I have gone. Please, do not worry. I have chosen to take control of my own destiny. I know that you wished for me to be a lady and to attend grand balls and be an ornament for some handsome and dapper city man. But alas, our visions do not marry up. I'm not sure that they ever did, though I imagine not so long ago you would have allowed me to have my way. I know that you believe that you have my best interests at heart, but I feel like I am a bird trapped in a gilded cage. I dream of being an eagle, able to reach the tops of the mountain hidden beyond the clouds. I wish to soar, my dearest Papa, and I am about to make that wish come true. Please do not fret. You have raised me to be a clever person. I am a child of the Lord, and I am certain that my faith will guide me through. I wish you health and happiness with Virginia, and such good luck for the many children that I am sure that the Lord will bless your union with. Your loving daughter, Eliza. By the time she had finished her letter, her cheeks were wet from her tears. In the end, it was comparatively easy to leave her father's house. Eliza hadn't slept the night before she was due to catch her train. She set her father's letter on her dressing table, checked over the room one last time. She'd timed it so that the servants would be busy with their breakfast after having served the family and before starting on the daily tasks. She waited for her father to leave for work, and then she quietly let herself out of the front door. Prosody 7%. She hurried to the end of the driveway, out along the road, where she met the waiting cab, who took her to the train station. She asked the cab driver to take a letter to Belle informing her of what she had decided to do, and tipped him extra to deliver it in person to her friend. No doubt Belle would be furious with her for shirking out of saying goodbye. Eliza wondered briefly if it was because she thought that Belle might talk her out of going, especially after how emotionally drained she'd felt from putting her feelings into the letter to her father. If she stayed, she was destined for a life of dress fittings and idle gossip, when what she really wanted was fun and adventure. She was buoyed along by the frenzied crowds that flowed into the train station building. The air was rent with echoing sounds of voices and sharp whistles, whilst the distinct smell of acrid smoke wafted over them. She erupted out onto the platform and gave a small cry of joy. Trains sat like sleeping dragons, hissing and puffing. Uniformed guards scurried along the sides, barking out their orders as the carriages filled with passengers. Eliza was directed to the train that was to take her to Helena, then Butte, following the Great Northern Line. Compared to the hive of activity beyond the windows, the interior was a sea of tranquility and calm. The interior of the train car was stunning, with thick carpet underfoot and velvet-lined chairs with matching drapes over the windows. Gold brocade patterns ran along the curved roof. Eliza set her bag in the overhead luggage that she was delighted to find folded out into a bunk to sleep in. She then hurried back to the door, where she slid the window down to poke her head out. The engine belched and clanked, jerking the cars to life as slowly but surely it began to edge its way out of the station. Eliza waved to the others who stood on the platforms, waving to no one in particular as excitement made her giddy enough to not care. Free. She was finally free of her constraints and heading for a new life. Chapter 5. Logan. The town of Onyx Peaks was nestled in amongst the foothills of craggy mountains. Densely packed forests were broken up with fast-flowing rivers that brimmed with fish and dark blue lakes that twinkled on the prairies. Primarily a mining town, the hastily built clapboard buildings on Front Street now looked dated when compared to the newer buildings at the edges of the town. Saloons, brothels, and gambling dens had been replaced with legitimate businesses that had transformed the boomtown into a bustling settlement. Logan steered the buggy over the uneven road towards the main street and reined over near the station entrance. The street was packed with other wagons, coaches, and buggies, a cacophony of noise that did nothing to soothe his stretched nerves. He wasn't sure why he felt edgy. Eliza Parrish seemed like a good woman. Though he hadn't been entirely honest with her, he'd neglected to mention about his ailing mother and about how Jake was. He'd explicitly asked for honesty, and now regret squeezed his gut. She seemed like a decent and sincere woman. How would she react when she first saw Jake? He rested his elbows on his knees as he stared at his boots. He was so engrossed in his thoughts that he didn't hear the voice until someone knocked on the side of the buggy. He lifted his blue eyes and his stomach dropped as he looked into the face of the reason why he'd kept the information to himself. "Hello, Maggie." "I thought that was you," she said. "We don't often see you in town these days. How are you?" It looked like married life agreed with her. A mean part of him had wanted her to look haggard and miserable when it was quite the opposite. He nodded his head and deliberately looked away from her. "Fine. You?" Her laughter grated on him. "Well, you don't seem fine, Logan. Surely we can let bygones be bygones. It's been 2 years. We have to live in this small town. Can't we at least be civil when we meet?" "This is me being civil," he muttered, his idle gaze watching the flow of people along the roads. In the distance, he heard the long, whining whistle of the approaching locomotive. Maggie exhaled noisily. "How's your mother, Jake?" His eyes cut back to her, his expression dark. "How's your husband, Maggie?" She threw up her hands and shook her head. "Fine, have it your way, Logan." Logan watched her walk away, knowing that he'd sounded petty, but he was beyond caring. It still burned him that she'd turned her back on him and his family, and he realized that the wounds were still not healed. And now he was going to put himself through that hurt once more. He felt the wave akin to panic wash over him as he turned to look at the telltale smoke rising from the train stack behind the station. He considered momentarily turning tail and fleeing back to the ranch, but then knew that his mama would nail his hide to the post if he chickened out at this late stage. With his eyes running over the fresh stream of people flowing out of the narrow end of the train station, he sighed. He would be polite, courteous, and respectful. But his days of fawning over a woman and putting her needs before his own and that of his family were behind him. Several young women were within the group, and he hopped down from the buggy, folding his arms across his chest as he tried to deduce which of one of them were here for him. He discarded one with a small child on her hip and watched a couple who walked with purpose to meet the stagecoach where it waited. Then he alighted upon one of them. She was standing off to the side, her hand shading her eyes against the low-setting sun as she took in her surroundings. He watched as she executed a twirl right in the center of the road, arms outstretched. She looked happy, carefree. As he continued his search for Miss Eliza, the crowd thinned out, and he realized that the twirler was now performing a search of her own. He felt the moment her attention fixed on him, felt the zinging deep in his gut, like suddenly he was the prime cut on a freshly slaughtered cow. She held his gaze as she crossed the street towards him, a wide smile on a face that had him enraptured. When she drew up in front of him, she paused, waited for him to say something. But there was only one coherent thought running through his head. Uh-oh. Eliza. Her first impression of Onyx Peaks was one of amazement. The town was busier than she'd given credence to, and she'd taken a moment to absorb the pleasant, fresh mountain air. She could see the timeless mountains nuzzling up to the horizon, and all around her was forest, with vivid green breaking up the skyline. Wooden-fronted clapboard buildings zigzagged along the street in which she stood, with neatly painted signs telling the shoppers what goods lurked within. She could see a maze of buildings that looked smarter, newer, further up along the street. Buggies and wagons were parked up as townsfolk loaded up their purchases. Further along the road, she could see a small corral where saddled horses stood and waited for their owners to return. Happiness erupted out, and she did a small jog on the spot. She was finally here. She had hardly slept as she wanted to absorb as much of the atmosphere and see as much of the country as she possibly could, from flat and dried-out prairie land to the plunging heights of the rugged cliffs that fell away to nothing, when she felt like she could just reach out to touch the fluffy clouds that drifted past the windows of the train cars. She couldn't quite believe that she had finally done it. The throng of passengers dwindled. Eliza looked around her once more as her mind moved towards her future husband. She'd been so involved in the adventure of her travels that he hadn't been on her mind that much. Looking about her, she saw a man was stood lounging against a small carriage, his arms folded across a broad chest. When he didn't move, she approached him. "Excuse me? Would you happen to know a Logan McKee?" The cowboy took off his wide-brimmed hat so that she could see his handsome face. A strong jaw and dark hair set off the bright blue eyes. "That's me, ma'am." Eliza's infectious grin widened, and she stuck out her hand. "I'm Eliza." His large hand easily covered hers, and she pumped his vigorously. "I'm glad to meet you. Your town. It's just as you said, so lovely." She waved a hand about her, taking in the sights once more. "Busy, too, and so many stores. I bet there's nothing here that you can't get in a big city, huh?" When she looked back, he was yet to take his eyes off her. Yes, that's right. Is that all you have?" She lifted her carpet bag. "It sure is. Everything I thought I'd need. I must say, I'm so glad you're here to meet me. I did half wonder if you might have been pulling my leg. And some of the women I met, goodness, the stories. One woman said a friend of hers was duped out here. Can you imagine traveling all this way for nothing?" "You sure, like to talk," Eliza laughed, bending at the waist, and she saw his lips twitch. "I'd like to say it's nerves, but I've been told many a time that I talk too much." Logan took her bag and put it into the buggy. "I guess I'll have to get used to it then. Do you need a?" But Eliza had already hauled herself up into the buggy, touching the leather bench, the wooden frame, looking around her to take in every detail. Logan settled in next to her, took up the reins, and flicked his wrist. Eliza clapped her hands together as the horse set off. She did not see the woman watching stood in the shadows of the general store, whose somber gaze tracked them until they were out of view. "Oh my," Eliza breathed, turning in her seat and craning her neck to get a better look at the small blue lake that shone in the embers of the sunset. "It's truly beautiful here. The air is so fresh, too. Have you been to a city before?" The air can be quite pungent, smoky, and some of the buildings are blackened because of the smoke. There are always people about, but here it's so peaceful. "Well," she wrinkled her nose as she sat back and dipped her head towards him. "It will be when someone stops talking." She felt relieved to see his lips curve slightly. He had been most reticent, almost as if he was regretting his decision. Maybe he was disappointed with the package that he'd believed he was getting compared to the one he'd received. She wasn't a vain woman, but she had been told that she was pretty. She'd not been lacking in suitors back home. She swallowed as she looked beyond the horse's ears that twitched along the dusty road that meandered through the stubby trees. Open fields that rolled into green pastures stretched out to her left. She gnawed her lip between her teeth as she considered the thought that maybe he'd changed his mind. His profile was passive, and she realized that unlike her suitors back home, he was older. He was different from them. He would have different experiences, and he wasn't as easy to read. Eliza couldn't stand the tension. She had to know, one way or the other. She angled herself towards him and braced for the answer in case it was one she didn't like. Am I a disappointment to you? Chapter 6. Logan. She was beautiful, that was true. She was bubbly and effused over every little detail of their town as the wheels trundled over the sandy roads. His mind raced ahead of him. He was out of sorts, and he put it down to Maggie. Seeing her again had upset the carefully constructed equilibrium around his bruised heart. 2 years ago, when Maggie had coldly informed him that she could no longer be in his life, that she wasn't going to burden herself with Jake, as well as caring for his elderly mother, Logan had been crushed. Now he wondered about the boisterous chatterbox next to him. How would she cope with the news of his brother? Logan had long ago stopped looking at the limitations his brother had to deal with daily. He'd long ago stopped seeing his brother as different. He was Jake. That was that. He felt like a heel for having brought this young woman out here, under what were false pretenses. He should have been truthful and open, but now he admitted that he'd been nervous about telling her. Maggie had hightailed it out of his life, and he couldn't tell his brother that he'd been right. She hadn't wanted to be a part of a family like the McKees. Why wouldn't this beautiful creature do exactly the same? When she'd stopped talking, he met her quizzical look with a puzzled one of his own. He realized that she was waiting for an answer, and he'd missed the question. I'm sorry, what? I asked if I was a disappointment to you. Logan frowned, his gaze moving back to the road. He steered the wagon into a left turn and saw the familiar, crudely made signage that was meant to represent an arch, though his father hadn't been able to afford a proper sign. Silver Key Ranch announced their arrival, and it snagged her attention, freeing him of the burden to answer her honestly. Instead, her face lit up as she read the name of the ranch, and she clapped her hands together once more. Oh my, she cried, this is a lovely place. Look at that delightful house. Logan followed her narrative as she mentioned the buildings. The home had been proudly built by his father, the hewn timber from local lumber, as was the low log cabin. It had a dog trot through the center. The yard was in disarray, wagons and barrels strewn around. The buildings looked neglected. Hens pecked at the ground around the corral, and they scattered as Logan guided their ride into the yard. The barn door leaned precariously on the hinge and creaked as it rocked in the breeze. He tried to see it as she described, quaint and rustically charming, but all he could see were the jobs that he still hadn't gotten round to, and the money it would take to complete the tasks. He tied the horse's reins to the hitching post that was outside of the barn as shame crawled across his skin. No wonder Maggie had left him. Eliza was gushing about the property when the front door opened, and Susanna came to stand on the stoop. His mother linked her fingers in front of her as she gave Eliza a tentative smile. Logan opened his mouth to warn them, someone, about Jake, and knew that he should have told Eliza the truth, to spare his family further pain and humiliation of the scorn of a stranger. He heard the thump shuffle sound of his brother moving, and when Jake came into view, Logan couldn't help the morbid fascination to watch her reaction to seeing him. Eliza. She stood in the yard, acutely aware that she was the center of everyone's attention. The woman who stood at the door had nerves rolling off her that seemed to eke into Eliza's bones. She heard the tap shuffle, and when the body came into view around the doorframe, she was first struck with how similar the two men looked. So similar, they could only be brothers, though the man on the sticks was much shorter than Logan. He looked up at her, the same wariness in his face as his ma, and Eliza knew that they were waiting on her reaction to something. Was it because this man was on crutches? Or something else? You must be Mrs. McKee? Eliza squared her shoulders and stepped forward, pumping the older woman's hand. Susanna, the woman said quietly, and Eliza felt the scrutiny of her gaze. Then she moved to the man at her side and smiled brightly. And a brother, for you have the same coloring as Logan. She grinned at the man and held out a hand. He stared at it before releasing a crutch to proffer a hand of his own. Jake McKee, I'm pleased to make your acquaintance, she shook his hand. I'm Eliza Parrish. Logan told me he had a family but didn't give me names. She turned to look across the yard. You have a lovely home. Thank you, Susanna replied, and the uncomfortable silence rolled on. Ever impatient, Eliza turned to Logan, propped a hand on her hip. Have you changed your mind? Is this why you all seem uncomfortable? Do you want me to return home? Logan shook his head, mirrored her stance with his hands on his hips, and smiled. No, I don't want you to return home. Then what is wrong? Her hands flew wide as her volume went up. It's me, Jake said quietly. They weren't sure how you'd react to seeing me. After all, I'm the reason Maggie left. His eyes went past Eliza's shoulder to meet his brother's stare. Eliza's relief was palpable. She filed the woman's name away for more investigation in the future. For now, she wouldn't have to return home with her tail between her legs. She looked to Jake, met the same blue gaze as her future husband's, and smiled. Is it because you're so short? Her lips hitched up on one side at her teasing tone. It was Jake who laughed first, and suddenly the tension between them all vanished. Won't you come on in and have some refreshments? Susanna indicated. Jake, move on back and let her through. Logan, fetch her bags inside and then see to the horses. She put an arm around Eliza and squeezed. We're going to get along just fine. The interior of the house was as shabby as the outside. Eliza guessed that the family was hard up. She pictured the ostentatious interior of her father's house, which was then overshadowed by the room she stood in, with the rustic touches of a blanket draped over the sideboard and a threadbare rug on the floor next to an open hearth. The furniture was sparse yet functional. A table filled the floor of the kitchen. A comfortable-looking armchair was next to the fire, and a mismatched sofa and smaller chair made up the living space. No books or shelves, no flowers or pretty ornaments. She saw Jake negotiate his way around the room and realized the spread-out room setup was to allow him to move without tripping over an obstacle. Through the window, she could see Logan liaising with two other men outside in the yard. How were your travels? Susanna crossed to the stove and added water to a pan from a bucket on the floor, and stoked the fire inside the stove to heat it. My goodness, Eliza said happily, just amazing. I've never traveled beyond New York, so I was very happy to get the invite out here and be given the opportunity to see new places. Eliza saw Logan set her bags just inside the door. They exchanged a brief look before he was gone again. I've never seen New York, Susanna replied. There's a couple of catalog women in the town that hail from there. You might want to get to know them. Eliza ghosted a smile. Prosody. The thought of meeting some vapid socialite filled her with dread. She had wanted to leave that life behind. That said, some of the mail-order brides-to-be that she'd met on the trains had regaled her with stories of woe and poor luck. Didn't she want to embrace this new life? Maybe she shouldn't be so quick to judge. That would be nice. Maybe at a church meeting or something? Susanna lifted a shoulder and made a non-committal sound. Ma isn't so big on going to church. Jake sat in one of the high-backed chairs next to the small square table in the corner, set his crutches to one side. Oh, that's okay. Jake, Susanna chided her son, unhappy with the admission. I like going to church, she said to Eliza with a sidelong look. Some of the women have been, her voice trailed off. Eliza turned to Jake, lifted a brow. Some people aren't comfortable around my family. Bad luck seems to follow us about. Jake! His mother slammed a hand on the countertop. Do not be putting words into my mouth. Jake shrugged without remorse. She may as well know now what she's getting into before she commits. Eliza pictured the stuffy school in Switzerland. Anything would be preferable to that. She crossed to the table and sat, resting her chin on her hand, and waved at Jake to expand on his comment. Jake gave a slight shake of his head, mindful of his mother's warning look. Eliza made a mental note to seek clarification at a later date. Maybe she did like to indulge in gossip after all. Eliza followed Logan along the passageway towards the back of the house. Her room was on the first floor, a tiny section of the house that had a bed and a freestanding basin. He carried her bag for her and stopped in front of a doorway, pushed open the door that creaked unpleasantly on its hinge as it swung open. She peeked past his shoulder into the space and took a look, keeping a careful smile on her face. The room was simple, containing only what was needed, nothing superfluous or decorative like she'd had back east. The bed clothing and curtains matched, though had seen better days. She felt touched that the family had seen to welcome her and make her feel at home by including such extravagances. She also deduced a sense of pride amongst the McKees. They didn't have much, and she guessed that what they did have had been hard-won through grit and sheer determination. "Ma thought you'd be comfortable here, and at least you'd have some privacy before we become husband and wife," he said quietly. He didn't meet Eliza's stare. Instead, he stepped inside and set the bag at the foot of the bed. She wondered then if he was as nervous as she felt. When he turned, their eyes met briefly before he looked at his boots again, crimson color tinting his sharp cheekbones. If you need anything. Where's the water closet?" He bent and pulled a pan from under the bed. "Outhouse is around the back, though I wouldn't go outside in the dark until you're a bit more used to it. Lots of wolves and mountain lions here." "Wolves?" she squeaked, a hand at her throat. He lifted a shoulder. "They keep away, but some are cheeky and will have a nip at most things. We'll talk tomorrow and I'll show you where we keep the bullets for your rifle." "The what now?" Her mouth dropped agape. "It was Ma's, but Jake kept up its maintenance, so it's pretty decent still, even though it's old. We've been having a spate of robberies and stick-ups round here recently. It's always sensible to have something to defend yourself with. I assume you've shot a gun before?" Eliza simply stared at him. Wolves? Guns? Surely he was teasing her? She waited for the punchline to ease the horror that was clutching at her chest, but his eyes remained passive, and he fidgeted under her stare. What's wrong? She closed her mouth and gave herself a mental shake. She was in the West now. Things were different out here. She was no longer constrained by societal rules. This was her life, and she had misled this man by telling him that she had experience in running a home and such, reassuring him in her letters that she could handle any situation that life may throw at her. She'd naively believed that she could simply bluff her way through. She couldn't tell him any different or risk looking a fool and having to return home. "Nothing," she replied. "I think I'm just tired." "I'll let you get settled in. There's a pump outside for the water for your wash bowl. The jug is there," he pointed, but she didn't follow the direction as her thoughts rioted about. Even after he left, she remained on the bed. This wasn't the city. This was the West, and the stories that she'd been told over the years about the lawlessness and the uncivilized men crowded in on her already clamoring mind. Suddenly, she felt very small and insignificant. She missed her father. She needed reassurance and the familiar. Instead, when she looked out of the windows, there were the Montana mountains covered in flora and fauna that contained innumerable terrors. Tears burned the backs of her eyes. She yearned for the comfort of a hug from the man she'd ran away from. Chapter 7. Eliza. The first evening, Eliza was treated to the most beautiful sunset as dusk blanketed the hillside, and the trees faded from green to purple to black. The cows clustered around the trees for warmth. Their shadowy contours blended into the dissolving darkness as they hunkered down for the night. Eventually, she drifted to a night of broken sleep. She awoke to the sun streaming through a gap in the drapes. It took her a moment to realize where she was. The feelings of disappointment filled her once more. She took her time getting dressed, and when she eventually got downstairs, only Susanna was in the house. Eliza hesitated at the bottom of the stairs, unsure of what to do or what to say. The older woman hobbled around, stopping often to catch her breath or to put a hand to her back. Logan had mentioned that he had been looking for help about the homestead. Eliza recalled how she had dismissed Belle's concerns, claiming that it would be easy work, when in reality, Eliza knew nothing on how to run a house. She bit back a deep sigh and wished mightily that she could take it all back. The pan crashing to the floor jolted Eliza out of her daydream, and when Susanna bent awkwardly for the item, Eliza rushed forward to help her. "Here, let me." Susanna let out a groan. "Oh, child, aren't you just the sweetest? I seem to have butterfingers today. I'm dropping everything. Thank you." Eliza set the pan on the side. "Can I help with anything?" "Goodness, no. You are a guest." Eliza folded her arms. "I am soon to be more than that," Susanna nodded. "That's right enough, I suppose, though you won't be married for a few days, maybe a week or so yet. Logan needs to go and speak to the minister and arrange the wedding first." "Where is he?" "Oh, he went out when it was still dark. He's a good boy, works hard to keep a roof over all of our heads. He is normally back around when the sun hits its zenith for something to eat." "And Jake? Feeding the hogs right now. He can't do as much, though he does try. He's a good man, too, though he has a hard time believing that of himself some days." Susanna gave her a pained look. "It's a welcome change to have something happy to focus on with you being here. Is there anything you need to get from the town? Maybe for the wedding?" "I bought a dress with me, but I should like to go and see the town in a bit more detail, get to know the area." Susanna went back to kneading the dough on the table. "I can take you if the boys are too busy." Eliza walked over to where Susanna sat. "You make your own bread?" Susanna's frown held a glint of amusement. "Yes, I do. Have you not made bread?" Eliza wasn't sure where the bread that had been set on the table in front of her as a child had come from. She'd never needed cause to know. She shook her head. "Come, I'll show you." Logan. Logan found them a short while later, dusty from flour and laughing gaily at a shared joke. He'd had a busy morning with tasks, but had completed them sooner than he'd thought. He'd planned on taking his future bride out on her own, try to get to know her a little better. When he met Eliza's sparkling look, his heart seemed to shudder a little in his chest. He hung his vest and hat on the back of the door, dragged a hand through his hair to try and tidy it a bit as he faced the two women. "How did you sleep?" he asked Eliza. "Well," Eliza bobbed her head. "Your mother said that you went out early." He nodded. "I thought maybe you'd like to take a ride, see the ranch for yourself." He ignored the speculative look his mother was giving him. Eliza sprung to her feet, quickly dusted off the hands. "That sounds lovely. Is that okay with you?" Susanna shrugged. "Fine, fine." She waved them away. "Off you go." The day was breezy, the wind whipping at the trees, and dust eddied across the yard as they stepped out. Eliza jogged down the steps, pulling up short when she spotted Jake holding two horses instead of the buggy that she thought Logan had meant. Logan had reached his brother before he realized that Eliza wasn't behind him. "What is it?" he called to her. Her clenched palms bounced off her thighs as she gave him a pasted-on smile. "Are we not taking a ride in a buggy or something?" "No, the ground isn't always suitable for the wagon." He paused as she continued to fidget. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she blurted. "I mean, isn't it too windy for the horses?" Logan looked to Jake, who shrugged. "Of course not." She cleared her throat, looked back to the house, but said nothing. "You can ride a horse, yes?" She gave a shrill laugh, clutched her hands in front of her, and walked purposefully at the horse, jumping when the animal sidestepped from her and she snatched her hands back. "What's wrong with it?" Her name is Toffee," Jake said, rubbing the nose of the mare. "Logan said that you were a competent rider, though Toffee is as sure-footed as a mountain goat." Logan watched Eliza carefully and could feel the tension coming off her. He tried to remember the contents of their letters and whether or not she'd mentioned that she'd been able to ride, or had he simply assumed. She wiped her palms on her skirt and reached for the pommel, squeaking when Toffee danced again. "Mine is broken. How come yours is standing still?" she snapped. "Eliza." His voice came out sharper than she intended. "Tell me you've ridden a horse before. When I told you about the gun yesterday, you looked at me as if I had two heads. I reasoned that away as just being because you're a woman, or most women are not confident with guns at first. But horses? Everyone has handled a horse. They are the backbone of how we move about. You said that you'd worked with animals. that the chores I spoke of all sounded acceptable to you because I assumed you'd had experience in them. She rounded on him, eyes flashing. No, you told me a list of jobs, and I said that sounded fine. You didn't mention having to ride a horse. How do you think we get around out here? The same as any normal person does, in a carriage. Her shrill voice set both the horses dancing. Do you think you could have your screaming match away from where I am at the risk of being trampled? Jake interjected mildly, trying in vain to hold on to the horse's reins as well as balance on his crutches. Logan thought of the money he'd spent, paying for her travel when she'd misled him. He thought about the plans he'd started to consider, picturing her as a companion and maybe having some children in their future. He realized that he'd started to fantasize about the life he'd once believed he would have with Maggie, only now he would have it with Eliza. Yet she had led him a merry dance, just as Maggie had done, and he was furious. He grabbed her by the arm and frog-marched her to the barn, where he spun her to face him. Did you think I wouldn't find out? She did, at least, have the good grace to look abashed. He growled when she remained mute. Talk to me. You're not talking, you're yelling, she shouted back, and you're being a brute. She rubbed her arm where he'd held her. Logan rubbed the back of his neck as his gaze fell to his boots and tried to get his temper under control. You lied to me. She glared at him, waited a beat. Percent. You did, too, though through omission. Her voice was soft, so as not to carry to where Jake was. You are not the man I thought you were. She whirled on a heel and fled towards the house. Yeah, same goes for you. He knew that his response was churlish. He saw as much on Jake's face when he traipsed back to where his brother stood still. That went well, Jake commented flippantly. Stay out of it, Logan snapped, taking the reins and walked away. He'd untacked both horses and turned them into the corral when Jake hobbled into the dusty stable a few minutes later. Jake leaned heavily on his crutches, a small smile playing about his mouth. Have you calmed down after your tantrum? Logan's brow met and he glared at his brother. I did no such thing, and I'll thank you to stay out of my business. Hard to stay out of it when the business is being yelled out across the whole ranch, brother. Logan hefted a saddle off the stable door and carried it to the tack shed, set it down, returned for the next one. Jake's words made him wince. He had bellowed at her like a madman. This is your fault why she's even here in the first place. And you should be grateful that a wonderful human such as she has even given you the time of day. Logan paused, turned to his brother. You don't even know her. Jake spread his hands. Don't need to. I read people fairly accurately. She has a good heart. Logan snorted, leaned the second saddle against the first, regarded his brother carefully. Why do you say that? You didn't tell her about me, did you? Logan opened his mouth to deny it, but swallowed the lie, shook his head. He remembered the way she'd spoken to Jake, without pity or judgment. She'd not shied away from his obvious differences. She'd not asked him to take her back to the train station so she could escape their poverty when she was so clearly out of her comfort and depth in the wilderness. He sent Jake a pained expression. I really hate you sometimes, Jake grinned, only because I'm always right. Chapter 8. Eliza. Eliza lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling as she absently stroked the knot in her belly. She shouldn't have come here. All of her actions, from lying to her father and deceiving Logan to involving Bella in her drama, she'd pulled this lovely family into a predicament by paying for her travel when it appeared that they didn't have 2 dimes to rub together, and she was no good to man nor beast when it came to helping them, as they'd asked of her. She couldn't even ride a horse. The soft tap on her bedroom pulled her into a sitting position. Hello? Logan's head peered around the edge of the door. Can I come in? Eliza swung her feet over the side of the bed as she nodded. She stood and walked to the window, looking out instead of at him. Tears stung her eyes, and she bowed her head. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm the one who should be apologizing, he said on a sigh. My behavior was unacceptable. She looked unseeing out of the window, knuckled away the tears. Please, look at me. She looked at him over her shoulder. He speared a hand through his hair, let out a hearty sigh. It's been a while since I've had to consider anyone outside of this family. I think I was focused on what I was going to get out of this deal without considering how it was going to affect you. You're in a strange place, away from your family. If you wish to return home, I will arrange that for you." She looked at him then, really looked at him. The dark hair and the somber face, harsh cut line of his mouth, and the pain in his blue eyes. He wasn't classically handsome like some of the suitors that she had met with back in New York, but he had a rugged element to him. Underneath the shy rancher, she could sense steel in his heart, and she wondered about his family, his past, the mysterious Maggie. Maybe his angry response earlier lay within some of that. She had lied to him. She had rejected Belle's concerns as being frivolous and the work being easy. Did she want to stay, or did she want to go home? Yes, she missed her father, but she acknowledged then that she still didn't want that life. She'd only been here less than a day, and yet already she knew that she didn't want to go back to the life of society balls and inconsequential chit-chat. She faced him fully, set her shoulders back. "I lied to you. You lied to me by leaving some things out about your family. So let's start again and make a promise not to lie to each other going forward." He gave her a nod. "Okay, I can live with that. I haven't ever ridden a horse before. We had people that put the equipment on them, the thing," she waved a hand as she searched for the word. "Saddle and bridle? Yes. We also had people who cleaned and cooked for us. I didn't have to do it. My father, he ran his businesses and needed help raising a daughter on his own. We had staff. I won't apologize for how I was brought up, the same as you wouldn't apologize either. We are from different worlds, Logan, but I don't want to go back. At least not unless you want me to. I can sew, just about. I can read and write. I can't shoot a gun or hunt or skin a rabbit." He cleared his throat as his mouth twitched. "I can show you how to do those things, and thank you for being honest with me. You want me to stay?" "Yes." "Very well." She stepped forward and shook his hand. "Let's do this." Eliza. She slept soundly the next night, waking the following morning before first light. She wasn't sure if it was the utter darkness of the mountains or the unfamiliar animal noises that pierced the dark air. She lit her lamp and quietly let herself out of her room and headed downstairs, giving both herself and Susanna a fright when she rounded the newel post at the bottom of the stairs. Susanna clutched her chest and leaned on the countertop. "Goodness, child, what are you doing out of bed?" Eliza patted her chest, too. "I could say the same of you, Susanna. It's the middle of the night," the older woman chortled. "That kind of thing alters as you get older, and you need less sleep. My hip gives me some pain. Moving about helps ease it. Can I make you some tea? Can I do anything to help? You can set the fire if you wish." Eliza nodded and turned to look at the darkened hearth as dread rolled around in her belly. She tried to recall watching one of their maids set the fire in her father's house. She knew it needed a bucket of some kind, and maybe something to burn. She shrugged, deciding to wing it. Not much later, Susanna was sat in the chair next to the cold fireplace, fingers laced across her stomach as she observed Eliza staring quizzically at the empty grate as she considered her next step. "You're not used to doing these things, are you?" Eliza sat back on her heels, the lie of assuring her that she did on her lips. But when she met that astute stare, she negated her head as the untruth scattered. "I thought I could do it." She brushed at her hair and smeared black soot across her cheek. She sent an apologetic grimace Susanna's way. "I'm afraid that I lied. I had visions of you having people who did this for you, much as I'd grown up with. I feel awful for having misled you." Susanna considered her, lips pursed. "Did Logan tell you about Jake before you arrived?" Eliza frowned. "What about him?" The lips now relaxed into a small smile. "Jake was a weak baby. I got sick after I had him, and I sometimes wonder if that's why he ended up the way he did. If it was something in my milk, I was told he wouldn't survive much past his early years. Then the doc said he wasn't strong enough to walk. Jake has this stubborn streak to him. Both of them do. They each carry a burden. Logan feels responsible for the family. Jake feels responsible for all of the hardships that we've had to endure. It's not often that Jake is treated like any other person. For his whole life, people have either ridiculed him or spoken to him like he's stupid. It's a rare thing to see whereby he is spoken to like the man that he is, rather than the invalid you see. That's special. Susanna's eyes moistened in the dim light from the lamp on the table at her elbow. Eliza crawled forward and patted a hand to Susanna's. They're lucky to have a mama like you, Mrs. McKee. My ma died when I was little. I don't remember much about her. I heard stories about her, that she was good and kind. I think that you'd have had some things in common. Susanna squeezed her hand. What does your daddy say about you being here? Eliza smiled, her eyes filling at the thought of her father and how they used to be. Those times had long since passed. She looked down as she returned to the fireplace. Oh, he understands. He's remarried, and he deserves a life of happiness after raising me. He has a new wife now. She's a good woman. Not mama kind, but when you write to him to let him know you're here safely, you can tell him I said he did well to raise a decent young woman. Eliza nodded, knowing that she wouldn't write that letter. She couldn't risk him coming here and dragging her back home. Once she was married, she reasoned, then he wouldn't be able to. Thinking about her father opening her letter pained her more than she'd care to admit, so she pushed the thoughts far from her mind. She looked again at the black fireplace, shook her head. He didn't raise me knowing how to light a fire, I can tell you that. Susanna settled back into the armchair and chuckled. I can teach you how to light a fire, my girl. I can teach you any chore. But what I cannot teach is the innate kindness you showed to my youngest boy. Eliza. She stood at the threshold of the front door, gnawing on her bottom lip as she stared across the expanse of the yard to where the storage shed was. She needed to go and get the grain. It was a simple enough task. But between where she was and the shed door was that dreadful cockerel. Eyes narrowed, ears cocked, she scanned the immediate vicinity. Sucking a breath, she set out across the yard only to spy the big fiend when she was out in the open. He ran at her, and with a yelp, she exited left and dove into the nearest door, slamming it shut and leaned back against it. Jake looked up in surprise from a workbench, a quizzical brow raised. The cockerel again? Eliza shoved from the door and blew out a breath. One of these days he will be in a pot and on the table, the wretched creature. Why doesn't he chase any of you? Because none of us are as pretty as you, he replied with a chuckle, and his attention returned to his work. Curiosity getting the better of her, she angled her head for a better look. His crutches leaned up against the wall behind him, and he was sat in a strange frame that helped support him, so he was not quite sitting, not quite standing. Fine ribbons of shaved wood lay around his feet. She peered closer. What are you doing? Oh, he seemed surprised by her inquiry. Just messing about, really. He set the wood away from him, as if he shouldn't have been touching it. With a gasp, Eliza picked up the item. The carving was of a wolf, the fur textured and keen bright eyes, its fluffy tail streaming out behind him, paw raised as if he was scenting the air. Her fingers ran over the wood, latent warmth from where he'd held it. Jake, this is beautiful. He scratched a whiskered cheek as he contemplated her. It is? Yes. My grandpa taught me to whittle. There wasn't much he couldn't make out of wood. He made me those. He indicated the sticks that helped him move about, cloth bundled about the armrest section for comfort. He'd seen soldiers coming back with such devices and made them. I think I got my love for it from him, and just took it a step further, I suppose. There are more? She glanced about him and saw a small shelf behind him. Other animals perched there, as well as a cowboy standing in the saddle of a galloping horse, a rifle aimed across his shoulder. She set the wolf down and moved to the shelf, her fingertips dancing over them. You have a real talent, Jake. Where do you sell them? He snorted derisively. I don't. It's just bits of old wood lying around, nothing to write home about. I can't do much else around here, so I keep my hands busy. She whirled on him. Why do you keep doing that? What? Putting yourself down. He sighed. When you hear bad things most of your life, you believe them. Have you tried selling them? No. He shook his head, eyes roaming the shelf behind her. Who would buy them? She thought about the trinkets that adorned her father's home, knew that he would love something to depict the West. Onyx Peaks has a trading post, passing trade from cowhands and miners. Logan said it's a hub for lots of people. Jake shook his head. No one would buy from me or my family." She put her hands on her hips. "How do you know if you haven't tried?" He sighed, spread his hands on the workbench, and leaned towards her. "Look, I know that you mean well, but around here, my family has a reputation. My pa was a good man, just not much of a businessman. He ran up a few debts." He cleared his throat, fiddled with a chisel. "Logan and Ma didn't know about it until after he died, and it took a little while for us to clear them. The town has a long memory, and Logan has to look further afield to do his trading. It's as if people are afraid that the bad luck that we have is contagious. The townsfolk wouldn't want to do any business with me, not just because I'm a cripple, but because I'm a McKee. But it's not up for discussion, Eliza, so drop it." Chapter 9. Logan. "Do you want to tell her that the washboard goes in the water before she dips the clothes in the lye?" Jake asked him. Logan rested his chin onto hands that he'd stacked on the top rail and watched Eliza where she stood puzzling over the laundry barrel. That Eliza didn't have a clue about how to run a home had become apparent to them all rather quickly. She was terrified of the chickens that appeared to make it their life's mission to chase her. She'd burned every meal so far and couldn't darn a stitch to save her life. However, her bubbly temperament and happy nature meant that you couldn't stay mad at her for long. The fact that he could delight himself in watching her all day was beside the point. "Let's just wait and see if she can figure it out for herself," Logan murmured. "It's a good job that she's both a fast learner and easy on the eye," Saul commented, drawing identical looks of surprise from both Jake and Logan. Saul shrugged his response and ambled back towards the stable. "He's right, though," Jake said quietly. Logan had noticed how the yard was less cluttered, and she'd only been here a few days. They'd visited with the minister yesterday and had decided to marry next week. He'd finally got her calm around the horses, though he'd had to lift her onto Toffee's back as she couldn't quite get the stirrups right. She'd soon relaxed into the saddle, appearing to enjoy the ride about the land that they'd share. That he enjoyed her company hadn't escaped anyone's notice, not least his own. He had taken to looking for her when he got up in the morning and trying to cut the day shorter to visit with her during the midday break when he was able to take one. She didn't seem to ever take a breath when she was talking, and already Saul and the other ranch hands adored her. Logan had mused out loud that it was because of the shortage of women in the state, but he knew that she would be a hit wherever she went. She seemed to be a light in his life that he hadn't realized that he wanted. Susanna came into his line of sight, moving to rescue Eliza, where she was tangled with the laundry, and then was shooed backward while Susanna sorted the problem. "Go and get the wagon ready," Susanna prompted her. "You can come with me into town." Eliza nodded and turned towards the barn, then spotted the brothers who were clearly amused by the state of her. She marched to them. "Come and show me how to set up the wagon," she called to Logan. He thought of the work tasks that lay ahead of him, but the idea of grabbing 10 minutes alone with her was more appealing. He pushed away from the fence and followed her into the outhouse. He took the harness and explained the pieces, showed her how to slip the bridle section over the head, how the arms of the buggy slid into place in the leather loops at the side of the pony. She listened, and she asked questions, her brow furrowed as she nibbled on her lower lip. He found himself watching the action and smiled at her endearingly. When she looked up at him, his breath stalled in his chest. For just a moment, she held the look, and he wondered briefly if she'd felt it too. But then she asked another question, and the moment was gone. "Eliza." Onyx Peaks indeed seemed to be a vibrant town. The rugged crests cradled the edges of the town, their timeless majesty a contrast to the brisk business. The town itself told a story of its own. From the worn, dilapidated trapper stores and trading post at the edge where the town had its origins, to the modern, busy train station and stagecoach swing station where the hotels did a quick trade nearby. %. The local mine brought workers seeking their fortune, and the train cars were filled with cattle from the surrounding areas, as ranchers supplied the bigger cities. She had traveled to the town a few times now, though still wasn't sure that she could find the way under her own steam just yet. The narrow track that led out of the hillside where the ranch was looked all the same to her untrained eye. She'd seen elk and wild dogs, eagles in the tops of the tall pines that lined the road. Tiny streams trickled between the rocky ledges, feeding into a wider river that ran parallel to the roadside. "Can I try driving on the way back?" Eliza asked as Susanna guided their little buggy to the side of the road and halted the pony. "Do you think you're ready?" Susanna teased her. "I have to learn sometime," Eliza quipped, "and you said yourself that I learn fast." Susanna slid down stiffly from the buggy and paused a moment as if in pain. Eliza made a mental note to remember a blanket for the older women's knees next time, though the proud woman would no doubt dismiss such a notion. Eliza had warmed quickly to the loving and gentle family. She felt enveloped in their kindness and believed that she had been blessed to meet them. That she was to be married into them was a bonus. She joined the older woman and they crossed the street together. They visited the textile store first, then the hardware store. "Susanna, I'm so glad I ran into you." They both turned to see an older woman darting between a wagon and a rider in the street as she waved to them. Susanna shaded her eyes and waited. "Eliza, this is Mrs. Linton, the pastor's wife. Geraldine, this is Eliza. She and Logan are to be married next week." Geraldine's keen gaze assessed Eliza, and she put out her hand. "My husband said that our Logan was to wed a girl from the city. What do you think of our little town?" Eliza smiled. "It's very nice, has everything a girl could need." The pastor's wife seemed satisfied with the response as she nodded and then turned her attention back to Susanna. "I'm so happy to have seen you out and about. We've missed you at church lately. Are you better?" Susanna looked uncomfortable under the scrutiny, and Eliza recalled what Jake had said about his mother avoiding the church meetings. Susanna coughed lightly, deliberately, Eliza knew, and put a hand to her throat. "Getting there. Thank you for asking." "What was it?" "There are some nasty illnesses about at the moment." Susanna looked at Eliza. "Would you run to the general store and get me some flour and starch, please? I'll join you shortly." Puzzled by her response, Eliza nodded and carried along the boardwalk. She wondered why Susanna had dismissed her when she was normally so open, then wondered if it was because of what Jake had told her last week, about the family having debts. When she entered the shop, a bell tinkled overhead. The interior was quiet, the shelves neatly ordered. Eliza looked over the many items, foodstuffs as well as clothing that any respectable cowboy should need. "Good afternoon, beautiful day, isn't it?" Eliza swung towards the voice and saw the shopkeeper. He was spindly and spry in a light gray shirt and bow tie, with a balding head that had the hair combed over the shiny pate. A neat mustache perched on his upper lip. She smiled. "Good afternoon." "Yes, it seems lovely today." She stuck out her hand and greeted him. Up close, she could see the silvery thread of a scar that spiderwebbed out from under the mustache. Similar scarring ran from the base of the thumb of the hand she held and run up his forearm, disappearing under the shirt sleeve that he'd rolled back to his elbow. She averted her gaze, knowing that his age put him in the bracket where he could have been a Civil War soldier. "How can I help you?" Eliza tried to recall the items that Susanna had mentioned. "Flour, starch. I think she mentioned baking a pie, so maybe some apples." "Ah, we're not quite far enough into the fall season for apples. I do have some cherries, fresh in today." Eliza shrugged. They sounded like they were meant to go in a pie. "Sure, why not?" She trailed behind him as he walked to a wide table that had wicker baskets and wooden crates filled with produce. As he dropped some berries into a bag, her eyes moved to the wall behind the table. The wall was filled with tapestries and drawings. "Who did the work on the wall?" He followed her pointing finger. "Local artists in the town. We have a talented group of people here." Eliza was struck with an idea. "Would you consider selling a different type of art? Wood carvings and the like?" He pursed his lips as his gaze slid over her. "Do you have any samples? Is it you?" "It's a family thing," she said carefully. "I can get you some samples of the work, though. It's very high quality and all handmade from local timber." "A local family?" His expression had turned speculative. Eliza opened her mouth to reply, but was cut off by a voice behind her. The McKees, an attractive woman with a hard glint in her eye, was leaning against the jamb of the door behind the wide shop counter. Eliza frowned, unsure how she knew the connection when she'd never seen the woman before in her life. The woman shoved away from the wall and threaded an arm through the man's, aligning herself against him. "Walt, darling, this is Logan McKee's new bride." His cheerful demeanor and speculative glances had vanished, replaced with a cold stare. "Not interested," he stated. "Do you have the money for these?" He shook the bag at her rudely. She blinked her confusion. "Of course," she said. "Show me." Eliza's mouth dropped open. "Pardon? I don't like your kind in my premises at the best of times." "My kind?" Eliza's voice climbed in volume. "But if you must shop in here, show me the color of your money first," he snapped out. Suddenly, everything became clear. Jake's words, the shame that Susanna seemed to carry with her, why she'd avoided going to church lately. Eliza had never been shunned before in her life, but she didn't feel shame. She was furious. Walt jabbed a finger at the front door. "Show me your money or get out." When Eliza continued to stare at him, he shook his head. "Maggie, show her the door." He tossed the bag of fruit onto the table and walked out the back of the shop. "Maggie," the woman who had broken Logan's heart. "You're Maggie?" The smile turned smug, then almost malevolent. "Oh, I see Logan has mentioned me. I guess it's hard to forget your first love." "Yes, he mentioned you. I believe it was in the same sentence as something one might scrape off a boot or—" Eliza waved a finger in the air as if pretending to think. The smile disappeared. Maggie stalked past Eliza and wrenched open the front door. "My husband has a mean streak in him and a long memory. You'd do best staying away from this store. We don't deal with debtors and tramps here." Eliza set her shoulders, lifted her chin, and sailed past her. She paused in the doorway and grinned and said, "It wasn't a boot, it was a female dog." She leaped back as the door slammed in her face. Susanna turned, as did other people in the street, and watched as Eliza strolled towards her. The pastor's wife hurried off, and Susanna waited for the young woman to join her, hawk-eyed stare taking in the flushed appearance. "Are we making friends?" Susanna questioned her lightly. Eliza looked back at the general store, met the steely glare of Maggie through the patterned glass door. "I met the delightful Maggie. We can't shop there anymore. Is there another store to get produce from?" Susanna rolled her eyes. "What has she said now?" "Nothing I can't handle. By the way, we're going to start going to church on Sundays from now on." Susanna frowned. "What I can't, I—" Eliza held up her hand. "I have never been thrown out of a shop before, or judged quite like I just have been by Maggie and Walt. What's his face? I am incensed that people can be so narrow-minded. Our family is a decent, hard-working family, Susanna. We've done nothing to be ashamed of." "But you don't know." She looped an arm through Susanna's and guided her back to the wagon. "I know more than you think," the older woman sighed. "Jake, starting now, the McKees' luck is going to change, and I will make it happen." As she handed Susanna into the wagon, she looked towards the end of the street where the trading post store was. This family took a chance on her, and she was determined to repay their kindness. Chapter 10. Eliza. The wedding day dawned on a fresh fall day, with the September wind blowing hard. Trees waved their fluffy tops as they seemed to dance in the breeze. Eliza wore a simple blue dress that she had brought from home. She weaved her hair into a fancy chignon at her neck and wore a necklace that she had borrowed from Susanna. Nerves fluttered in her stomach, and several times she found herself having to suck in a breath like she was forgetting to breathe. Logan looked dashing with his dark hair neatly combed with a gray shirt and flannel slacks. He even had a flower pinned to his chest. They arrived at the little church, and as Eliza stood opposite the man whom she was about to promise the rest of her life to, she felt almost as if she wasn't quite involved. She realized that she didn't have her loved ones around her. Not her father, nor Belle. Just the McKees, and whilst she had fallen in love with the family, she wasn't quite sure how she was supposed to feel about the man who she faced now. He seemed nervous, too. His eyes flitted around the space, and his voice quietly recited the words that Pastor Linton asked him to say. She could admit that he was pleasant to look at. She'd caught him watching her warily, and more than once. Yet, he remained hard for her to read. And whenever she'd asked him what was wrong, he'd given her a nondescript answer. What she wanted to hear was something that echoed the growing feelings that she was developing for the rancher. He was reliable, hardworking, and had been honest with her when it came to teaching her things about the ranch, just not about important matters of the heart. She'd probed more about Maggie, both with Logan and Jake, but the subject had been summarily closed with no way of eking out more information. She stood there, filled with apprehension, as she recognized that she was marrying a complete stranger. Logan. The church was quiet, filled only with his family and now his new bride. He'd dreamed about being a husband one day. He'd even gone as far as starting to picture a family with her. Tonight, he knew that he would be expected to take her to his bed. He'd assumed that she was virtuous, as she'd not indicated otherwise. He wasn't experienced like that. It was that, combined with his feelings for her, that seemed to unnerve him the most. If he gave in to these feelings, if he gave himself to her, she would have the power to rip his heart out, just as Maggie had done so. He had told himself to be careful, to take things slowly, but her fearless and outgoing nature meant that she had involved herself, and now them, in the community. His mother had mentioned a confrontation between Eliza and Maggie, though no one had been forthcoming with letting him know what had happened. It had made him step back from her. He'd seen the disappointment in her eyes, yet had still pulled away. Even now, when she looked radiant and glowing, he avoided looking at her. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, he pecked a kiss to her cheek and led her down the aisle, as was expected of him. He stepped out into the waning sunshine, settled his hat on his head. Some of the townsfolk had gathered around the fence to see the bride. Beyond it, it was business as usual. Susanna approached him. "Geraldine Linton is asking Jake and me to stay and have something to eat. I thought it might be nice for you both to have some alone time this afternoon." Logan felt something akin to panic leap into his throat. "Ma, that's not necessary," he began, avoiding Eliza's perplexed look. "I have work to do, and so won't be able to return and collect you both." He could see his response surprised his mother. Prosody rate 7%. "You don't want to spend any time alone with your new bride, Logan?" Geraldine interrupted his reply and without further ado stole his mother and his cover for returning to work away. "I shall just go and thank Mr. Linton for a lovely sermon," Eliza muttered. Logan watched her go, his conscience plaguing him. She was so young. Why had she saddled herself to someone like him? "You do scrub up well," the cat-like voice purred next to his ear. He jumped as if he had been scalded. He looked into the dark, seductive eyes of Maggie. "What are you doing here?" "The same as everyone else." She lifted a creamy shoulder out of the pretty top she wore. "Came to see the happy couple. Only you don't look so happy, Logan." He scowled at her, annoyed that she continued to hound him, even after she had cast him aside. "I'm fine," she pouted playfully. "I wondered if maybe you were wishing you'd wed me instead." "Everyone knows that girl is hapless, clueless, and—" "Enough," he cut her off. "That's my wife you're talking about. You made your choice 3 years ago. I don't think about you anymore." The husky laugh threw him off. "Your bride even told me you spoke of me often. Do I bother you that much still?" Logan narrowed her eyes as he wondered what Eliza had told her about them. He knew that she liked to talk a lot, usually about nonsense and inconsequential stuff. What else had she let slip? Poor Logan. "Maybe tonight, when you're in bed beside your new wife, you'll think of me the same as I often think of you." Logan growled in disgust and stormed off, ignoring the congratulatory shouts from people at the church fence line. Eliza. She sat beside her new husband, quite unsure why his disposition was so irate, though she could hazard a guess as to why. She'd seen Maggie Randall loitering around the church garden, a vindictive smirk on her pretty face, as Eliza had left the pastor and his wife with her new in-laws. She'd been excited and nervous when she'd heard that she was to have some time alone with him. She wondered if the very chaste kiss he'd bestowed upon her had been because they'd had an audience. He was a shy man, after all. The horse trotted along the rocky road, jolting her unpleasantly. It was when she was thrown into his hard body for a third time that she hissed out her irritation. Can you slow down before you either break a wheel or I break a tooth, please? She said, righting herself. He didn't respond, but did, at least, reduce the speed to a more comfortable walk. She watched his profile, saw the muscle bouncing in his jawline. I'd ask you what's wrong, but I'll only get the standard reply of nothing, so I shan't waste my breath. He did astound her then as he stopped the buggy in the center of the road. What have you said to Maggie Randall about me? Her mouth fell open at the unexpected question. About you? She recalled the conversation in the grocery store. He saw the recognition on her face. So, she was right? You did say something? Eliza gave a nervous laugh. It was to try and insult her, actually. I don't want you to talk about my family to anyone, he ground out, blazing blue eyes burning as he glared at her. Not to anyone, and certainly not to her. Do I make myself clear? She blinked at the sting of tears. She'd been defending him. What did she say that I'd said? It's not up for discussion, he snapped. What has she done to get you so angry with me? Why is she still bothering you? Are you still in love with her? His knuckles turned white on the reins. A pang of sorrow blasted through her when he didn't deny it. She pushed on, determined to know now. Logan, are you? No, he roared. I just want to be able to trust my wife, a stranger that I have invited into my home. I want you to not talk to anyone about our business. You were brought here to look after my mother and Jake. You are a means to an end. We will not be sharing a bed. Not now, not ever. Chapter 11. Eliza. The atmosphere in the buggy was frosty, to say the least. Logan was driving, with Jake rocking along next to him, staring moodily across the meadows that they raced past. Susanna sat next to Eliza on the back bench behind them. Her expression was as mutinous as both of her sons, and she had her arms folded, pinning the thick blanket to her. Eliza's glance danced around them all. The argument that morning had been terrific, but she had badgered and cajoled them, until out of pure frustration, they had all climbed into the wagon just to shut her up. Just because you've put the harness on yourself doesn't mean you can use this excuse every time you want to get your own way, Logan tossed over his shoulder at her. Eliza smirked, but wisely remained quiet. I am not stopping long, Susanna retorted. You said to the pastor's wife that you'd be here today? I heard you say as much when we married the other day, Eliza pointed out. Did you tell an untruth? Susanna sent her a dirty look. Don't you use my words against me, child. I say lots of things, but don't always mean them. I have work to do. Things that can wait until later. I told you, this family has done nothing wrong. We have as much right to attend church as anyone else here in town. I heard talk of a church meeting. I should like for us both to attend that too. Susanna's scowl deepened. I will do no such thing. The buggy lapsed into silence. You did used to say that your strudel was a hit at those events, Ma. Jake spoke over his shoulder. So? His mother bit out. I used to be able to hop a fence and read without having the words by my nose. Things change. This is your fault that she's got this bee in her bonnet. She swung round on Eliza. Things were just fine before you came along, you know. Eliza's lips thinned, and she wondered briefly if she had maybe pushed the family too far trying to do well. She longed to look at Logan, but couldn't take the stark expression that he now kept whenever they were near one another. She'd thrown herself into the role that he'd firmly put her in a bid to offset the hurt and upset that he'd caused her. They were married. John Parrish could no longer steal her away. Instead, she was stuck in a loveless marriage to a man who was colder than a winter's day in New York. Logan had demanded that she helped her in-laws as best as she could. In her mind, that meant integrating them back into a community that they felt ostracized from. People stare at me, Jake muttered darkly, hunkered into the seat next to his brother. Talk. Eliza sighed as she saw the familiar squat buildings at the edge of the township coming into view. If they're talking about you, it just means they're leaving someone else alone. They'll eventually turn their sights onto some other poor, unsuspecting soul, no doubt. We're doing this. Logan steered the buggy towards the little gray church that they'd exchanged their quiet vows in only a few days ago. Her husband had barely looked at her since they'd arrived home. The afternoon of her wedding day, as had the evening and every evening since, had been spent alone in her little room at the back of the house. If Jake or Susanna knew, no one mentioned it. Logan had explicitly said that they would not share a room, nor would he become a husband to her in the truest sense. Instead, to cope with her anguish, she'd been too busy around the homestead to think about it too much. She'd worked on growing her independence, on learning as much as she could from Susanna and the ranch hands to join in the family life. The wagon turned into the street where the church was, and Eliza held back her groan. There was a sizable crowd gathered outside the neat white fencing of the church. The noise of chattering died away as the family was recognized. She met the dark scowl of Logan that he sent over his shoulder before he got down, and then assisted Susanna out of the carriage. Eliza didn't wait. Instead, she got down and stood as Jake awkwardly followed her, then wobbled a bit on his crutches. A quick look at her family, and guilt twinged inside. They all looked incredibly uncomfortable. Jake kept his gaze down, as did Susanna. Logan stared stiffly ahead as he walked past the group. Eliza ran her eyes over the bunch, spotted a few familiar faces that she'd seen in the town, including Maggie and Walton Randall. "Good morning," she called out, smiling gaily, and she waved. If in doubt, brazen it out, she thought as she walked inside the church. She sat in between Jake and Logan, with Susanna next to her firstborn. The sermon that the pastor gave was entertaining, and she could feel the family relaxing slightly on the bench as the morning went on. By the time they'd finished and stepped outside, storm clouds had gathered on the horizon and the wind had begun to whip up. "Susanna," the pastor's wife called out, and she rushed across the grass to them. "Oh, I was so pleased to see you here this morning with your whole family, too." Susanna sent a telling look to Eliza. "We weren't left with much choice," pastor's wife laughed merrily. "Well, whatever the reason, it was a pleasure to see you all. Does this mean we can expect your return to the church meetings?" "I don't know about that." "Come now, Susanna. No one can compare to your strudel." She stepped closer and dropped her voice. "Believe me, others have tried and not succeeded. While I've got you here, will you have a word with Mildred Banks about the harvest barn dance we're planning next month?" Susanna was led away by the arm, leaving the three younger ones watching her. Eliza sighed. "Now, that bit wasn't my doing, so she can't be mad with me for that." She looked at the brothers for confirmation, to find Logan staring hard across the churchyard. She followed his eyes, and her heart lurched when she saw the object of his attention. Maggie Randall. "I'll go and wait in the wagon," he muttered, turned on a heel, and strode away. She watched his retreating back, speculating over the reaction. Was he still hurting, or could he just not stand seeing her? Jake angled his body, shuffling on the stones until he faced her. "He's just cross because you outmaneuvered him, that's all. He's a proud man, just like my pa. He'll come around." Eliza smiled at him then, and her eyes tracked Logan's retreating back. She tensed up when Maggie appeared next to him, and he stopped walking. They had their heads close together in conversation, and jealousy rippled through her gut. "I'm not so sure about that." "That's nothing. Yes, they have history, but—" he began, but was knocked when a man brushed past him, sent him careening into Eliza, who then had to hold him up until he had righted himself. "Aren't you going to apologize?" Eliza called out to him, ignoring Jake's request to be quiet. The man stopped, gave them both a once-over. "For what?" "You nearly knocked him over," he scoffed. "He was in my way, he should have moved." Eliza gaped. Her gaze roamed the crowd, collected into clusters and glancing back at the McKees. She could see then that they were all talking about them by the strange, surreptitious looks they were getting. Suddenly, she understood the reluctance of the McKees. This attention, this pinpointed focus was so disconcerting. No wonder the family had shied away from town life. "He has a name," she called out, "as do I, as do all of you." Her voice rose so as people heard her. "You call yourselves good citizens. You've been to church today. You've been to give thanks and accept blessings from the Lord. But where is your kindness, your compassion, when it comes to this family? I can hear you talking. I can feel your judgment. Well, now I hope you can feel my judgment of you all too, and you should be ashamed, in front of the house of the Lord too. Come, Jake, take me home." His blue eyes tracked the crowd, and he nodded. She looped her arm around his crutch, and they walked towards the waiting wagon. Logan. His temper had simmered below the surface all of the way home. While she was pretty to look at and her enthusiasm for things was infectious, he preferred the quiet life. He liked to fly under the radar, especially when it came to his family's reputation. Knowing the history, he'd tried hard to build a solid business for him and his family, having to do deals with companies further away and having to swallow some of the transport costs to undercut other ranchers. Seeing Maggie had simply added salt to the wound than having his new wife draw more attention to them. He shook his head as he reined the wagon to a stop. He bellowed for Saul, helped his mother down, and waited impatiently as his brother and wife alighted the cab. "Yes, boss?" "Deal with this," he waved at the horses. "I've got things to do." "I can do it," Eliza said, but he cut her off with a look. "I think you've done enough damage today." "Logan," Jake's tone held a warning. "It's not her fault." "Sure it is," he said sardonically. Of course, his brother was going to stick up for her. It had been his bright idea to find a wife in the first place. "We've just added fodder to the gossip mill for the rest of the town, just as things had started to quieten down for us. You've kicked up the hornet's nest once more, and you don't even seem to care." "She was sticking up for us," Jake interjected. "Boys, please," Susanna said tiredly, but was ignored. "No, Ma," Logan waved her away. "She's allowed her say, and so I'll have mine," he whirled on Eliza. "Bringing you here was a mistake. You're a busybody woman with no skills whatsoever. You were only brought here for one reason, which was to help look after this family, and you can't even do that right." He saw the pain in her shocked expression, saw the tears fill her eyes, and wished he could stuff the words back into his mouth. Maybe he didn't deserve anything nice? Wasn't that why Maggie had left him? He threw his hands up in the air and slammed his way into the barn. 10 minutes later, Jake came in. Logan lay on top of the straw bales, a forearm across his eyes and his hat resting on his belly. He heard the tap shuffle and the groan as Jake lowered himself onto a small sawhorse bench in the corner. Then, silence. Logan couldn't take the pressure of waiting for his brother to speak. "I know I have to apologize to her," he muttered. Jake cleared his throat. Logan lifted his arm from his face and squinted across to where his brother was. "What?" Jake pulled a face, shook his head. "I can hear the judgment. What is it?" Jake considered Logan for a second. "I'm wondering if Eliza, your very pretty wife, was right." Logan pushed onto his elbow. "What about?" "Well, I saw what she saw. You talking to Maggie, then you had this explosive temper tantrum. It was the same the other day. You've barely looked at her, and I know for sure that you're not sharing a room with her." Eliza wondered if there were any feelings between you both still. I assured her that there wasn't. But it did get me to thinking, have you married one while still in love with another? Chapter 12, Logan. Now there was a loaded question he had no intention of answering. Logan flopped onto his back. "Go away, Jake." But his brother didn't move. Logan replaced the forearm across his face, pushed away the urge for a drink. He wasn't his father. "What were you both talking about?" Logan recalled the conversation where she had insinuated herself into his line of sight and made sure that she had touched him, stroking a hand down his arm that had set his skin crawling. "She asked me to take a carriage ride with her," he said dully, voice muffled. He moved his arm and sat up. "She said that she missed me, and that seeing me married made her evaluate her own life." Jake tilted his head. "So, she dumps you, leaves you for another man. Then when you move on, she thinks she can crook her little finger and you'll run back to her?" "That's about the long and short of it, yes." "Huh." Jake pursed his lips. "What was your response to that?" Logan leaned back against the wall, squeezed his eyes shut. "I yelled at my new wife like it was all her fault. Twice." He dug his thumbs into his eye sockets and groaned. "Do you have any feelings towards Eliza? Or was it just marriage for convenience, as you said?" Logan considered the tingles he got whenever he looked at her. He lifted a shoulder. How could he love someone he barely knew? How could he love someone who drove him nuts with frustration? Jake shifted slightly, rested his chin on the hand that held a crutch. "So, you have two women in your life, and you don't know which one you want. The one who left you, or the one who's making an effort to fight for your family? He pinned his little brother with a look, his eyes sparking with annoyance once more. It's not like that. Seems that way to me, Jake reasoned. I'm not in love with Maggie. I'm not, he repeated. Seeing her again brings up all of these old feelings. She's messing with my head, and I think that she knows it. You have no idea how lucky you are. Logan sighed, his boots thudding as they hit the floor. He didn't want to get into it again with Jake. I came in here for some peace and quiet, he muttered. Eliza is a great woman, loyal and honest. Well, maybe you should have married her, Logan bit back. You seem hell-bent on making her business your own. Yes, but she's not in love with me, is she, you giant oaf? He glared at his brother. She's not in love with me. You're being absurd. You are too obtuse to see what's right in front of you. If you took a look around, really took a look at her, she's in love with you, Logan. Why else would she be doing all of this for you? Because she's an interfering blabbermouth, Logan threw his arms wide. Jake's breath hissed out, and he took 2 attempts to get to his feet. Fine, have it your way. But you're being ridiculous and an idiot. I'm not going to stand around and watch you ruin that young girl's life. Cut her free, Logan. If that's how you're going to treat her, she deserves better. Logan opened his mouth to ask Jake to explain, but closed it again. Stared at the closed shed door long after Jake had hobbled through it. Was his brother right? If so, how did he feel about her? Did he love her back? Eliza stepped out of the trapper's store, feeling quite smug with herself. She knew that Jake would be furious, but she would cross that bridge when she came to it. She cast a glance up the street and stepped out onto the road, now damp from the recent rainfall. She could sense the change in the weather, even just by the slight drop in temperature. She'd heard the talk about the fall and then the winter, and was quite excited to see the seasonal changes for herself. She collected her little pony out of the corral and led it to the fence line. She added her 2 purchases to the saddle pack and was doing up the strap when she heard the throat being cleared behind her. After the showdown at the church the other day, she braced herself for another confrontation. She didn't know who the young slip of a woman was stood there. She had brown hair and kind, brown eyes, though her fingers were knotted in front of her as she swayed from foot to foot. Hello, Eliza said. The girl gave her a quick smile before her gaze returned to her boots again. I'm Eliza, the girl nodded. I know. I was at the church on Sunday. She looked over her shoulder and took a step closer, anxiety rolling off her that made concern curl in Eliza's belly. You were, huh? Eliza recalled the scene with a sense of mortification. I think just about the whole town saw it. She smiled at Eliza briefly. Yes, she took another step closer. I just wanted to say how brave I think you are, for sticking up for the McKees that way. They're lucky to have someone like you in their corner. And you were right. Some people in this town believe they're whiter than white when they're not. Eliza clapped her hands. Thank you. What's your name? Sally. Another glance down the street. Sally Neiman. My pa, he has the hotel down over there. Eliza looked at that grand exterior of the building. It looks nice. The girl remained where she was. Something else on your mind? Sally swallowed, bobbed her head. Jake, how is he? Now her curiosity was piqued. Eliza stepped up to the young woman and realized that she was a bit older than she'd assumed. She was older than Eliza. He's okay. How do you know Jake? Sally lifted a shoulder and shook her head. We were friends, but my father, she paused and winced. He wasn't very nice about Jake or the family. I wasn't to have anything to do with them. That's too bad, Eliza said. Yet here Sally was, risking the wrath of the town by speaking to her and asking after him. I'm just on my way back home now. Shall I give him a message for you? Or maybe you'd like to write to him sometime. I can pass it along. A deep crimson color flushed the other woman's face. Oh no, I don't think I'd like to, but... Your father wouldn't allow it? Eliza supplied for her. Shall I tell Jake you said hello at least? The smile that Sally gave to her was beautiful, and it lit up her whole face. I think that would be just grand. Thank you, Eliza. When she returned to the ranch, she untacked Toffee and turned her into the meadow. smiled as she watched her trot away, then dropped to her knees to roll in the mud. She'd been touched that she'd been assigned a horse of her own, and, in not quite the month that she'd been here, she'd grown to enjoy the feeling of freedom of being able to ride around independently. Tacking up the pony was quicker than the wagon, though she enjoyed driving about in that, too. It was refreshing to have freedom, though when she was in bed, alone at night, she was plagued with loneliness as well as guilt over her father. She wondered if Belle had caved and told him where she was. If she had, was he so enraged over her desertion and treatment of him? Had he washed his hands of her once and for all? The yard was empty, save for those wretched chickens. Luckily, the cockerel was nowhere about. She shoved down on the disappointment that she hadn't seen Logan at all for a few days. He'd even stopped dropping into the homestead during the day, as he had before they were married. His words had hurt her deeply, but his actions left her bereft. Susanna had apologized for him, but it pained her to see this wonderful family hiding away in the woods as if they'd committed a cardinal sin. They'd made amends and paid the price. Enough was enough. She hefted the saddle pack onto her shoulder, put the saddle into the tack shed, and then made her way to the little workshop, thinking that she'd start there first. She hit pay dirt on the first attempt. Jake was stood in the middle of the space, a picture of confusion and panic. "They've all gone. My carvings. I think someone has stolen them, but why would someone have taken them?" Eliza put the bag on the floor by her feet, and when she straightened, put her hands on her hips. "Okay, I have a couple of things to say." Jake's eyes narrowed, taking in her pose. "What did you do?" She smiled, that then spread to a grin. "I took them to the trapper store." His face dropped, shock and then annoyance burned way for anger. "You did what?" She lifted her hands. "Wait before you get cross with me." "What did you do that for, Eliza?" he bellowed. "Why must you always interfere?" "Those were mine. They belonged to me," he ranted, his face twisting in fury, and she bent to undo the strap, reached inside. "You can't just come here and do what you wish. This is people's lives you're messing with. You can't keep behaving this way. I want them back. They were my things." She marched across to his workbench and set the pile of money on top of it, made sure the coins pinned the banknote down. With a sigh, she turned back to him and indicated the stash. "This is why." Jake stared, dumbfounded, moving from the money to her and back. "Where did that come from?" "Randall isn't the only place in town that will trade with local artists. I was talking to a traveling salesman yesterday. I mentioned to him about your skills. He bought them all, Jake, for money. He said he can sell them. He wants more. People back east decorate their homes with these trinkets. Real pieces of timber carved into symbols of the West." She pointed to the part-carved piece on his bench. "You have talent, Jake. You keep believing that you are nothing, less than nothing, because you're shorter than everyone else. I'm just showing you that you can be something more." I need to sit down." He plopped onto the bench behind him. Someone bought them?" She folded her arms. "I'd say I told you so, but I'm guessing that men don't like to hear that much round here." The door behind them opened, and Logan's tall frame filled the space. "Saul said he heard yelling in here," he said, his gaze dancing between them both. "Your brother has just made his first commission sale." The door banged shut, and Logan walked into the dusty space. "I don't follow." Jake dragged his hands down his face, his hands slapping onto his thighs as he leaned forward. "It seems that Eliza saw a market for my carvings. She took them to a salesman at the trading post." He pointed to the money on the desk, "and he bought them." Logan looked at the money and his eyes widened. "All of that is yours?" Jake nodded. "Either that or your good lady wife is the masked robber that has been holding up the coaches long before we met her." Eliza gave a belly laugh. "If only I was a better shot." Logan looked at her then. "How did you talk him into it?" "I didn't need to. He saw them and liked them, just as I said people would. You know yourself that the people in Onyx Peaks aren't the only people that you can trade with." Logan's mouth relaxed into a smile then. He clapped his brother on the shoulder. "Well done, brother. Grandpa would be very proud." Jake pushed to his feet, shuffled towards Eliza, and held out a hand. She shook it enthusiastically. "Thank you. I'm truly touched. I don't think I've ever had someone believe in me quite the way you have done today. Well, hold on to your hat because I have a message for you from Sally Neiman. Now she could see that she'd really thrown him. Sally, how do you know her? She came up to me today, asked me how you were. His smile mirrored Sally's from earlier. What else did she say? She said to say hello. His teeth flashed as the grin widened and he nodded. Her father said that I could never provide for her, so she wasn't to have anything to do with me. He's a big, scary guy, Jake added. I'll be going back to town again in a day or so. If you'd like me to pass a message back to her, I can do so. Jake seemed to consider her answer, smiling even as shadows filled his eyes. I'll think about it. Good, Eliza bent for her saddlebag. I'll go help Ma get supper ready. She'd reached the door when Logan called out. Eliza? She looked back at him, tried to stem the ache that seeing him tended to bring on in her. It was like an itch that she couldn't assuage whenever she was near him. Yes? Thank you. She dipped her head. People can overcome lots of things if they work together for the greater good. My father taught me that. Chapter 13. Logan. You're quiet today. Logan glanced at Saul, then returned his brooding stare to the horizon. Am I? Saul shrugged. More so than normal. The corner of Logan's mouth lifted in a half-smile. He tipped back the brim of his hat with his thumb, moving fluidly with his pinto as she fought him for the bit and tried to lower her head to the grass at her feet. He realized that Saul was waiting for a reply, but he just shrugged. Something on your mind? He'd worked side by side with his ranch hand for years, as Saul had worked sporadically for Logan's father before he'd passed away. Logan had needed a man with experience, and Saul had been the obvious choice. Gently dependable, Saul had been ideal to bounce ideas off, as Logan had dipped his toe into ranching and tried to make a business in a country still recovering financially from a civil war. He ran his tongue over his teeth as he contemplated just how much he felt like sharing. Dark blue eyes studied the lumpy forms of cattle where they were dotted over the field, their occasional lowing like a soothing lullaby to him. Spruce and ponderosa pine stood green as larch and poplar turned to a golden yellow. The snow-capped mountaintops disappeared into the low-lying cloud, and the air carried the scent of rain. Fall was well on its way. You think I'm just waiting for the other shoe to fall, Saul. When the old ranch hand didn't reply, Logan angled his head to check if he'd been heard. Saul was staring narrow-eyed at the tree line. You mean you're waiting for something to go wrong? Well, yeah. For the first time ever, fences are staying up, cattle are being sold, and we have managed to get a little bit of savings in the pot. Even Jake has got some work that he is good at, and he's not so resentful that he can't contribute, so he's happier. There's less arguing between us. It seems that things are good, and I just don't like it. Saul coughed out a dry laugh. Son, this is because you're not used to things going right. Everyone goes through rough patches in their life. You gotta learn to enjoy the good times, not wait around for the bad times to come back. Logan wondered if that was what he was doing, waiting for something to go wrong again because it was what he was used to. Listen, you said yourself your brother is getting a good income from selling his carvings. You've always felt responsible for him. I've seen how you are. Now that burden is off you. You need to start thinking about what you want instead of worrying about what's going to happen. You got a beautiful lady wife in your bed, yet I don't see the patter of tiny feet. It's been nearly 2 months that you've been a married man, Logan. A man has got to put down his roots, start a family so that you have someone to pass all of this down to. You should start living your own life, Logan. Logan scratched his whiskers, gave the pinto her head for a moment so that she could snatch a few bites of meadow grass. Sol didn't know that Eliza still slept down the hall in her own room. No one outside of the family did. Neither Jake nor Susanna had made any further comment on the fact that as a married couple, they didn't share a bed. Even Jake was now writing in secret to the Neiman girl in town. People were moving on, whilst Logan was static, stuck in the same place. After the way he'd spoken to Eliza on their wedding day, he wasn't sure how to come back from that. He still remembered the way that she'd looked at him, with a hopeful wariness that he'd stamped on. He felt like a heel for doing that to her. She'd proven her worth since, by taking the family with her on her wild ride to bring them all back to life, back into the community. Her staunch support of them meant that they were all attending church again, that the local ranchers were seeking out Logan's advice on how to trade with farms further south and about sending beef back east. She had been the catalyst for this change. "She's a good woman, Logan," Saul eventually said, "loud and headstrong, but sometimes you gotta light that firecracker and let her burn to see the most beauty in this life. Don't waste your youth waiting for death." Logan nodded on a sigh. "It's a little perturbing that you're so well versed in the ways of life, Saul." Teeth flashed in the brown leather face. "Truth is, Logan, I ain't no angel myself." Logan chuckled as he lifted the mare's head and clicked his tongue, then set off down from the grassy knoll. "You're a dark horse, and that's the truth, Saul." The sun was setting down low in the afternoon sky as Eliza and Jake began to make their way out of town, the reins resting in Jake's hands as he guided the buggy. The day had been unseasonably warm, but without the sun in the sky, there was a chill in the air that made Eliza tug up the collar of her jacket higher around her neck. She'd heard of how harsh the winters could be, but was yet to be able to picture it, as the trees were still full of leaves, only just starting to fade to burnt sienna in some parts of the forest. They left the trapper's store and drove on past the grocer's and the mercantile, the saloon, and the sheriff's office. Eliza's eye moved to the Grand Hotel at the end of the road. She knew the moment he'd spotted Sally sweeping down the porch outside as she felt him stiffen beside her. "Are you going to say hello?" she murmured, but a glance at his profile showed he was staring ahead. "To whom?" Eliza sighed, lifting a hand to wave at Sally when the woman stopped to look at them. A swift dig of the elbow to the ribs had him scowling, but he did lift his hat by way of greeting to her, and she gave him a shy smile back. He settled the hat on his head, and Eliza sighed heavily. "You are as stubborn as a boar, Jake McKee." He rubbed absently where her elbow had struck him. "Am not," he muttered. "Why would I get her hopes up, or indeed mine, when her father forbade us speaking? I know we've been exchanging letters, but I don't want her father seeing that we're back in contact. She has asked me to keep it a secret for now." She lifted the bag of cash up that she had on her knee. "You're a man of substance now. The whole town is talking about how you've started up a new business. At the church group the other day, where Sally was, I may add, the pastor's wife was telling me how the mayor's wife, I can't recall the woman's name, is delighted that one of her husband's citizens is putting Onyx Peaks on the map. Even Maggie was staring at me and your ma." Jake gave her a sidelong look as he considered the answer, turned the buggy out on the main road, and left the town behind. "Just because I've sold some items, it's hardly a bustling business. For goodness sake, you will run out of excuses one day about why you can't be with her. She's offered you an olive branch. And you've sold more than a few." She shook the bag next to his head. "There's enough money in here to take you through to Christmas, and then when the snow has melted, you'll have had more time to make more things. This is a real thing, Jake, whether you can admit it or not. Sally's father cannot say that you won't provide for her. Logan is right. We have to be cautious. What if we stop selling, or the salesman stops coming?" At the mention of her husband's name, she closed her mouth. Eyes roamed along the sweeping tree line, the shadows growing deeper as they headed further into the hills. "We're not talking about your brother. I understand your reticence, but will you please see this as a good sign?" His dark eyes met hers then. "You don't want to talk about Logan, or you won't?" She folded her arms, her expression mutinous. "Don't try and change the subject." She cut off his retort when she sat bolt upright and laid a hand on his arm. "Jake, look." On the road ahead lay a darkened mound. The pair fell silent as they tried to work out what the pile was. The little pony's ears alerted and were swiveling. Eliza pushed herself to stand as she squinted through the falling dusk. "Is it a person or—" "I don't know," he murmured, and he reined to a stop. "Hello?" he called out. "That's a person," Eliza said, and leaped from the buggy, ignoring Jake's order to stay where she was. She rushed towards the lump, hearing the scraping and thud of Jake's boots as he slid awkwardly down, followed by his muttering. She was so focused on the unmoving person that she missed the shadows in the trees moving, morphing into men. She reached the bundle of clothing, calling to the person, gasping when the tangle of cloth fell open with nothing inside. The deep rumble of a chuckle made her turn, and she had to squint through the low light. 4 men stood, pistols dangling from their hands, their heads covered with a sack that had slits cut into them for their eyes. Too late, she realized that the clothing had been a ploy to stop them. Her eyes traveled the group, and she knew that she was facing the bandits that had been tormenting the community for some time. Chapter 14. Eliza. "What are you doing?" Eliza demanded. "Is this your idea of a joke?" She pointed at the clothing. "Eliza," Jake's voice was low, and he negated his head. He shuffled round to face the group. "We don't want any trouble." "That's a shame," the one who'd chuckled said. "We like trouble, don't we, boys?" He waggled the gun in his hand, moving it between them both. "Hand over the money and we'll be on our way." Eliza's brows met as she thought of the bag of cash in the buggy. How did they know that they had anything? She decided to call their bluff, try and brazen it out. "What money?" The gun was settled on her, and fear shivered across her skin. "Do you think I'm stupid? I know about the money. Get it." He waved the nose of the gun towards the buggy. Jake began to shuffle towards the buggy, and the group guffawed. One of them imitated his unusual gait, which resulted in more hilarity. "Should have drowned him at birth," the ringleader muttered. "Waste of good food and clothing, if you ask me." Eliza felt fury lick through her. "No one did ask you, you imbecile. He earned that money, a decent and hard-working man. I wouldn't say the same of you. I can't even call you men." The ringleader, a heavy-set man, took a menacing step towards her. "What did you just say to me?" She angled her chin, defiance drawing her taller. "You heard me." He grabbed at her then, his fingers biting into her arm. She shoved back at him, teeth bared. He advanced on her again, and she balled her fists at her side. "Wait," Jake called out. "Please, we don't want any trouble. It's here." He hefted the bag out of the buggy. "Too late," the man snarled. "I'm going to do what should have been done years ago. You need putting down like a rabid dog, and she needs to learn a lesson." Eliza's breath shuddered as the man lifted the gun and took aim at Jake. She heard Jake's urgent yelp and made a split-second decision. It would be her fault if he was shot. She lunged for the gun, knocking the arm that held it, and she sank her teeth into it, driving him backward. They wrestled, a string of profanity erupting from him as she fought him for the gun. She was incensed that they thought they could simply take from them, after everything that the family had been through. His taunting words towards Jake burned her temper higher. The group seemed to erupt into sound, bellows as the situation spiraled out of control. When they both landed on the floor, she was surprised at how soft his body was, and then she realized that it was padding. She scratched and clawed at him, trying to get the sack off his head. The sudden explosion that rent the air. She went limp as pain seared up her side and into her shoulder. She rolled onto her back, staring at the hazy sky, her breath wheezing as cold slithered through her body. Sound ebbed away. It was an effort to even blink. With a wisp of breath, she closed her eyes. Logan. They should have been back hours ago. Logan paced the floor in the cabin. "Something is wrong." Susanna looked like she was about to disagree with him. "Mama, you've been placating me for the past hour. I feel it in my gut. Something is wrong." She looked to the window, the darkness yawning beyond the glass. She sighed. "Okay, but it's probably that a wheel has come off the buggy. Not what you're thinking. She won't have a clue, and Jake won't be able to help." Logan growled as a multitude of scenarios flooded his mind. Dangers that weren't just a broken wheel or a hungry four-legged animal. He snatched his hat off the back of the door, picked up a lamp, and jogged down the steps. He'd take Saul and one of the others, get a posse together, and start with the main road into town. The nagging fear that had been following him about doggedly since the sun had gone down bloomed into terror as he heard the thundering of approaching hooves. His hand went to his gun belt, and he lifted the lantern aloft. The big chestnut horse slid to a halt in the yard. Nostrils flared from panting. "Logan, quickly, we need your help. Get the wagon." "What is it?" He peered through the gloom. "Sally, what the—" "I've no time to explain," she shouted. "It's Eliza! You need to hurry!" Logan bellowed for Saul, barked out orders to the sleepy ranch hand, and tacked up his horse. Within minutes, he was back in the yard. His pinto was trotting even before he'd settled into the saddle, and they went tearing out of the yard. The wind stung his eyes as he raced through the darkness behind Sally, dread paralyzing his mind. He'd pushed Eliza away since they'd got married, fearful of the feelings that she'd evoked in him. Seeing Maggie, hearing her voice, having her touch him, had reminded him of all the reasons he'd not wanted to become emotionally involved ever again. He'd asked Sally for further explanation, but it appeared that all of her concentration was going into negotiating the roads as she didn't reply to his repeated questions. He saw a low light up ahead, and he tried to make out what it was. They were halfway between the farm and Onyx Peaks when Sally began to slow. As they got closer, Logan could make out his buggy, and a lantern hooked on the back of it. He could see shapes, and Sally reined her ride to one side. Logan dismounted at a run and threw the reins to Sally, then dropped to his knees. Jake was propped up against the wheel of the buggy, dark streaks down his face, and he stared miserably at his brother. In his lap, he cradled Eliza's head. Logan stalled as he took in her pale pallor. "Is she?" Jake shook his head. "No, she's still breathing, but it's shallow. She was shot." Logan reached out a hand, stroked a lock of her hair back from her face. Her skin was cold. He knew his fear was mirrored in the look his brother sent him. "Sally, go fetch the doc. My father went for him. Ask them to meet me at the ranch. I need to get her in the warm. Go quickly, now please." She mounted, and with a yah, went careening off back towards the town. "I couldn't lift her into the buggy," Jake said. "I tried, but I could just about drag her." "Doesn't matter," Logan said, turned as he heard the sound of the wagon coming in behind them. "It's fine. You stayed with her. But if I could have lifted her, I could have got help." "Jake, shut up." Logan slid his hands around her back and under her legs, lifting her gently from his brother. He cradled her to his chest and strode towards Saul. "Sally has gone for the doc. We need to get her home and get her warm," he called out. "Turn it around, Saul." He settled Eliza gently into the bed of the trailer, then went back and hauled Jake to his feet. He put a hand on his brother's shoulder, more to comfort him than to steady him. "Bring the buggy home," he told him. Jake nodded once, avoiding his brother's gaze. "Jake, unless you shot her, it's not your fault," Logan said again. He unhooked his horse's reins from where Sally had tied them and ran back to the wagon, attaching them to the wagon. Then he climbed up into the back and pulled Eliza into his arms once more. "Move it, Saul. She's freezing." The wagon jerked as his ranch hands slapped the reins, and they headed back towards the ranch. He ran a hand over her soft, downy cheek, the moonlight making her pale face even more ethereal, and he held her tighter, trying to will some of his warmth into her body. They pulled up into the yard, and he carried Eliza into the house as Jake's buggy rattled into the yard behind them. He kicked open the front door, striding into the space, and settled her onto the sofa. Susanna clapped her hands over her mouth. "Oh no, what happened? Where's Jake?" "I don't know what happened. He's coming now," he snapped. "They were down on the mountain road. She's been shot." In the light, he could see the blood that had soaked her side. Her face was almost blue. She was so pale. "She's so cold, Ma. There's so much blood." His voice choked off as the terror threatened to overwhelm him. He couldn't lose her. "The doc?" Sally Neiman's father went for him. He probed her ribs gently, looking for the bullet hole. The fire poker clanged on the metallic grate as Susanna stoked the fire and set a pan on the stove for hot water. What was she doing there? "I don't know, Ma." He found the hole, a clean shot through her shoulder. "Help me, please." "Here, use these either side." He grabbed the cotton cloth that she held out and pressed it to the wound. "I don't know what happened," he repeated, his eyes running over Eliza's still form. Jake appeared in the doorway, his face haggard and just as pale as Eliza's. "I'm so sorry, Logan." There was no time left for pacification. Her breathing was feeble, and a faint sweat had broken out on her brow. He knew deep down that she was gravely ill. Logan lowered his head to hers, closed his eyes, and began to pray. Chapter 15. Logan. The sun was flowering in the dawn sky when the doc's little buggy trundled away down the drive. He'd left strict home care instructions for them all and had told them all to pray for her. Logan leaned against the post at the edge of the wraparound porch, eyes narrowed against the light. He looked out over the yard, though his chaotic thoughts jumbled up in the fog of sleep deprivation. The soft thud scrap behind him told him Jake had made his way onto the porch too. Sally Neiman had left not long after the doc had arrived, with a promise to come and see them again when it was light. Jake plopped into the wide bench under the kitchen window and set his sticks by his leg. When Logan looked at him, he was digging his knuckles into his eyes and then scrubbed at his face. They had matching dark stubble on their chins and the same dark rings around their eyes. Jake held his brother's gaze for a moment before he spoke. "I tried to stop her," Logan nodded. He'd gathered the little snippets of information from the conversation between Sally and Jake. After the gang had scarpered, Jake had tried to lift Eliza into the buggy before he'd taken his rifle, and then Eliza's. One by one, he'd shot all of the bullets into the air, trying to attract the attention of anyone local. It had been Sally who had come looking, alerting her father to the noise as she had been cleaning up and heard the sound echoing along the valley. Jake had argued with old man Neiman, telling him to go get help and for Sally to fetch his brother, instead of trying to move her themselves. He'd heard how Eliza had been defending Jake and had fought the bandit, but also how she had riled up the men by calling them names. "I know," he said on a sigh. He looked again at his brother, saw his anguish reflected at him. "Doc said she just has to rest and we have to wait. He said she's young so," Jake sniffed. "She has to be okay." Logan toed his boot into the wooden floor, sucked on his teeth as he pondered. The thought of not having her near him or seeing her daily filled him with more fear than he'd ever known. He knew then that he loved her, that what he'd had with Maggie was paled in comparison. His fear of being hurt again meant that he hadn't enjoyed being a husband to her, his fearless bride. Movement drew his gaze up and he saw Sally riding into the yard. She rode up to the hitching post outside the barn, dismounted, and approached the men, her head bowed. "How is she doing?" She paused in the center of the yard. Logan shrugged. "Doc says we just have to wait it out. She's sleeping, not sure from the wound or from the laudanum he gave her." "She woke up?" Logan shook his head. "I wanted to thank you and your father for your help last night. I wish there was more we could have done, if we'd have gotten there sooner." "You might have been shot, too," Jake interjected. Her eyes slid to Jake briefly. Even in his grief-stricken state, Logan could tell when he wasn't wanted. I have something I need to do, if you'll excuse me." He strolled into the house, checked briefly on Eliza, and then went and sat at his writing desk. "Ah, Jake." The silence between them stretched out. Jake looked everywhere, trying to avoid her probing glare. Her boot heel on the bottom step made him look at her. "You look dreadful," she murmured on a half-smile. He felt his lips twitching in response. "I feel it, too. I wanted to thank you for last night." She lifted a shoulder. "Your brother already has, and your ma. I've been meaning to come by and see you. I didn't anticipate on such a drama, just to get you to speak to me, though. You said that you wanted it to be a secret. I have enjoyed writing to you, though I'm not sure how far we should take it. That's why I stopped replying. When I saw you yesterday, I wasn't sure how to act, in case your father was watching." He dropped his gaze from hers, rubbing at a stain on his thigh. Sally climbed the steps, her hands entwined in front of her. After a moment of hesitation, she sat next to him on the bench. Jake looked at her then, at the clear honey-brown eyes and the dusting of freckles on her nose and the rosy cheeks. Being so tantalizingly close to her choked off the words in his throat. She was more beautiful than he remembered. "I enjoyed getting your letters, Jake," she whispered, those lovely eyes shining brightly with unshed tears. "I didn't say to stop." Jake's gaze roamed her face. "No, you didn't. I thought it best." "Why?" He thought a moment. "Your father, he told me to stay away from you. He's right. You deserve more than I could ever offer." Exasperation growled out of her. "You and my father are deciding what's best for me when neither of you has checked to see what I want?" Jake's brows lifted. "What is it that you want?" "You." Her simple response made him blink. She couldn't possibly know what she was doing to him. He shook his head. Last night, Logan arrived and within minutes carried his wife in his arms to safety as if she weighed less than a feather. That's what a real man can do. He can walk tall and hunt and ride fast. I have to lug these bum legs around. I could barely drag her the 10 feet to the buggy. You need a man who can carry you and take care of you. She rolled her lips inwards as she listened to him. My pa's brother lost a leg in the war. Would you say he's less of a man because he was brave and fought for what he believed in? Jake's mouth went slack. He closed it and stared out across the expanse of land beyond the yard. Of course not. He can't help it. Sally put a hand to his arm. He jolted at her soft touch and then met her kind-hearted gaze with his startled one. And neither can you. I don't care that you can't carry me around. Not every woman wants that. And you should stop using your disability as an excuse to not live, not take a chance, because I'm getting sick of hearing it. Her thumb grazed along the dark hairs on his forearm as she stroked the skin. But your father said, I know what he said. And I'm telling you, I don't care if we have to live in a mud hut next to a river. I love you, Jake. I'm sick of not being able to say it out loud. How can you love someone like me? Torment strangled his voice. Are you saying you don't love me? Because if you don't, then I'm wasting everyone's time. He looked at her, at the raw emotion on her face, and the hope that filled it. He covered her hand with one of his own. I love you, he whispered, but is it enough? Her smile split her face. It's a start. Eliza. Noises and echoes reverberated through the mists that swirled in her head. Sometimes the fire brought her closer to the surface, and she could make out the sounds more clearly. But then the pain was all-consuming, and she wanted to run back to the oblivion, sinking down into the black cloud of nothing, fuzzy at the edges, as memories eddied like bubbles in a stream, here, then gone. Sometimes when she got nearer to the surface, she could hear Logan's deep baritone, and she moved towards it. Loud voices, booming and angry, made her want to reach out and soothe, to ease the angst. Her eyes flickered, and the colors of the sky and the sunlight danced as something cool was placed across her head. She could hear the tone of his voice, but his words swam through the fog, and then she was swallowed once more by the black. When she eventually opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was the sky, gray and ominous as the rain trickled down the windows in rivulets. Her eyes tracked around the room, the furniture tidy and simple. A fire simmered in the hearth. For a moment, she tried to pull on her mind. Why was she in the front room, and on a bed no less? She opened her mouth but only managed a croak. When she tried to sit up, her head exploded, and a searing pain ripped across her back and down her arm. She flopped back, the effort making tears spring into her eyes. Eliza? She turned towards the voice, confusion reigning as she realized that she was looking at Virginia. Chapter 16. Eliza. She blinked several times. Can you hear me? The other woman crossed to the bed and laid a cool hand against her forehead. It felt nice, and Eliza closed her eyes. She nodded her reply. Hold on, I'll go and get the others. The hand went with her, and Eliza sighed, thinking she was having a crazy dream. A few minutes later, several pairs of footsteps came running into the room. Oh, Eliza, my darling girl. John Parrish fell to the floor next to her and put his arms around her. Papa? She was astonished to feel her father's embrace. This wasn't a dream. Papa, I don't understand. What are you doing here? John pulled back, reproach in his glare. I could ask the same of you, my girl. I've been going out of my mind with worry. What did you mean by disappearing like that? Do you know what you did to me? Eliza could see it for herself. He looked gaunt and older. The ramifications of her impetuous behavior were staring back at her. She'd left, ran away, got married. Her eyes tracked to the others in the room. Jake, Susanna, Virginia, Sally, all hovering. Then her mind woke up and the flood of memories filled her mind. An onslaught of images. The robbery, the fight, the taunting man. Where's Logan? Here, he stepped into view, his eyes sunk into his head, worry etched across his stark features. Relief flooded through her, and she held his stare, wanting to reach out to him, even as she remembered those cold words that he'd flung at her. How long have I been like this? She asked him. Not quite 2 weeks. I was shot. she said. He nodded. Yes, you and Jake were held up. The money was stolen. Sally and her father helped Jake. We brought you back here. I remember. You should rest, John said now. You're starting to sweat again. We'll get the doctor here to check on you, then clear you for travel back to New York. What? She said quickly and gasped her pain at the sudden movement. Your father, Logan began, then fixed her with a look. You didn't tell me that he didn't know where you were. I wrote to the address that you had been writing to me from to let him know of your condition. Your friend Bell then let your father know where you were. He arrived yesterday. He's, not best pleased at the conditions you've been living in. Eliza saw the censure in her father's expression and held out a hand to him. Help me up? I don't think that you should move, her father said. She kept her hand aloft and shook it at him. Help me. She gritted her teeth at the hurt that throbbed through her shoulder as John eased her into a sitting position. She leaned her head back against the wall, panting. Her gaze bounced between her husband and her father's. You can't stay here, Eliza. Look at you. You nearly died. It's too dangerous for a start. Your letter said that you felt like you were in the way with Virginia and me when things couldn't be further from the truth. You've made your point. You don't have to go to the school in Europe, but you can't stay here. It's barely habitable. Susanna blew out her cheeks, muttered something indiscernible under her breath. Papa, I know that you mean well, but I'm not going back to New York. John's eyes bugged out. Of course you are, and the issue isn't up for discussion. You are dressed like a tramp. You are a Parrish. We have certain standards, and these are not even close to them. His sweeping arms encompassed the rustic interior in one. John, Virginia put a restraining hand on her husband. She's a grown woman. And you're being very rude to my in-laws, Eliza muttered. He's only married you for your money. John bit out. Any fool can see it. Eliza's mouth dropped open as Logan took a step forward, fire spitting from his eyes. That's a lie. You will be on your own. You won't get a dime out of me. John rounded on his son-in-law, anger contorting his face. I didn't even know she had money, nor do I need anything from you. Now, you've seen your daughter. You can take your insults and leave my property. Right, this instant. Not without my daughter. Her father fired at him. She's my wife, Logan snarled back. The two men squared up to each other and the atmosphere crackled between them. Eliza pushed her damp hair back and attempted to stand, falling back to the bed with a cry. Logan was kneeling next to her, holding her. What do you need? He asked softly. I need you to fetch the sheriff, she murmured, her eyes drifting closed. What? When she opened her eyes again, she met the deep blue, shadowed dark through lack of sleep. Get me the sheriff. I know who it was who shot me. Chapter 17. Eliza. The sheriff of Onyx Peak had a calm and affable demeanor, but he still stared at Eliza as if she had sprouted a new head. He pulled on his earlobe as he contemplated her answer. She was sitting in Susanna's chair next to the fire, a blanket wrapped about her legs and another around her shoulders. Everything ached, yet she felt more alive than she could ever remember. John sat at the small table. Logan leaned against the door in the corner with his arms folded, one ankle crossed over the other as he brooded out of the window. You sure? The sheriff asked. She bobbed her head. Yes, sir. Jake said he was tall, thick-set man, bulky and with a big gut on him. He did present like that, yes, but when we fell, I had a soft landing on top of him. He must have put cushions or something under his clothes to disguise himself. They also knew that we'd have money and what it was from. It had to be someone local to know this much information. And the insults they hurled at Jake, it suggested that they knew him, the sheriff sighed. Anything else? When I bit him, I saw the scars. I could feel them on his arm. But make no mistake, the man who robbed us and shot me was Walton Randall. Visions tripped through her mind, the struggle, clawing at him as she fought. But she saw the arm as clear as she could see the sheriff now. He was pretty banged up when I saw him a few days ago, the sheriff admitted. He said his horse had tripped and he'd fallen into a bush. We laughed about it. Eliza thinned her mouth. Just thinking about the dreadful man and his haughty tone towards her in his shop annoyed her. He's not likely to admit that a woman scratched him and put him on his backside, though, is he? Nor that he's part of the gang that had been robbing coaches. No, ma'am, I don't suppose he would. He slapped his hands to his thighs and pressed to his feet, collected his hat from off the small side table. I best go and have a word with our local grocer, see what he has to say for himself. I'll be back. He bade a farewell to John and nodded to Logan on his way out. The clock ticking and the fire crackling was the only sound that filled the room as the three of them looked at each other. Eliza felt anxiety curling its way sinuously through her gut as her gaze flitted between the two men. Speaking to the sheriff had been an almost cathartic experience and had left her feeling empty and exhausted. Her father sat stoically on the natty chair, an elbow resting on the scoured wooden surface of the table. Seeing him looking as broken as he did gave her cause to stop and consider what her rash actions had put him through. Yet he'd arrived here, insulted what was now her family, and assumed that he could boss her around still. She wasn't sure that he'd heard any of her words about not returning home. Then there was her husband, lounging indolently against the far wall, his stance and his gaze unreadable. She knew that they'd not truly spent much time together, yet she still had the pull, the deep attraction that made her want to gravitate towards him. He'd acted proprietary towards her when her father had said that he was taking her home, though his words did not match his actions. Maybe he didn't feel towards her the way that she did towards him. Was she wasting her time fighting for a marriage when he was still in love with another woman? She bit her lip as her eyes stung with tears at the thought. She picked at the skin around her thumbnail, avoiding meeting either of their looks. She felt like whatever her decision was, she was going to upset someone. Her father was the first one to speak. He cleared his throat, scratched a nail through his brow, looking away fleetingly. Eliza lifted her gaze to meet his through her lashes. I owe you an apology. Her brows met her hairline as she stared at her father. She remained quiet, watching him with bated breath. Virginia reminded me that you are a strong woman, independent, obstinate. Logan huffed out a breath. Don't forget Moolish and sassy, too. John's mouth curved at the additions, though he didn't look at Logan. Outspoken and passionate about what you believe in. That's what got her shot, Logan added. Indeed, John agreed, then added quietly, but those are many qualities that your mother had. Her tears spilled over her lids and fell unchecked down her cheeks. Her father rarely spoke of her mother, and she had always clung on to the little snippets to go with the very few memories that she had of her. It hadn't occurred to her that having her near him was a painful reminder of what he'd lost. Papa, she said, I never meant to. John held up a hand to stem the words as though he couldn't stop them from coming out now that he had started. I tried to give you the life that you wanted, that I thought you needed, and that you deserved. I thought you should marry a decent man from a solid background, one who could keep you in the life of luxury, that you should be a lady and have the things that your mother and I worked so hard for. He exhaled with a shake of his head. I think I knew deep down that you wouldn't have been happy being married to some banker. You were always happiest stuck up a tree or chasing the neighborhood pets around. When I saw you, laying on that cot, all broken and, gosh, you were so pale, I think I panicked. I wanted to scoop you up and take you straight home, keep you safe. He dragged a hand through his thinning hair. Virginia reminded me that Logan had written home to let your family know, and that he had been awake for days on end, sitting vigil by your bedside before we arrived. I've spoken to the pastor, and he tells me that they're a good Christian family, decent and hardworking. Her father's image blurred through her tears. Oh, Papa, she breathed. I've missed you, and I'm so sorry to have worried you. I just didn't know what to do. You certainly stood up and made me pay attention. Look, Eliza, if you want to come home, then I'd be delighted. He sent a look to the resigned man in the corner who was still staring out of the window. But on the same tack, you're a married woman now. This is your life, and it's your decision. And I'd be happy to use some of my contacts in the West to help grow the cattle business, if you are so inclined, Logan. Logan turned his head then, his expression passive. He lifted his head in acknowledgement. Right. Well, I'll go and find Virginia and we'll head back to the hotel for the night. I've asked Solomon to set the buggy up for you, Logan said pleasantly. He'll accompany you back so that you can get there safely. That way, you will have the buggy to come back here with tomorrow. That's very good of you. Thank you, John said stiffly. He pecked Eliza on the cheek. I'll be back in the morning. Try and get some rest. She watched him leave, suppressed a sigh. She wondered if this was the breakthrough that they needed and if he would tell her more about her mother. That she had some of her mother's tendencies filled her with emotion. She looked across the room to where her husband was, quietly watching her in that unnerving way of his, the ensuing silence palpable between them. I think I should apologize to Virginia, too. It sounds like she's been fighting my corner for me in my absence, she murmured. Why didn't you tell me about your father, about the way things were between you? He was framed by the light coming from the window, throwing his features in stark contrast. I wasn't sure how to say it. He was making me do something that I didn't want to do, and he wouldn't listen to reason. Upon reflection, my actions were wrong. I was spoiled and impetuous. I wanted adventure and fun, and I didn't stop to think about the consequences that my activities may have on him. Is that all I was to you? A bit of fun? Her brows met. Never, she whispered. Trepidation filled her, the words getting stuck in her throat, though she longed to voice them. It was now or never, she realized. Was I a mistake to you? He elbowed away from the frame. No, I shouldn't have said those things to you on our wedding day. Only I wasn't sure how to make it up to you. She sniffed, played with the material of her skirt. I didn't gossip about your family with Maggie. She was being all superior to me. I may have called her a rude name, but then I saw you that day we all went to church the first time, with Maggie. I saw her touching you. Given your history, Logan closed his eyes on a sigh, crossed the room, and knelt on the floor in front of her. There's nothing between Maggie and me. She likes to stir up drama. I know this now. The only mistake I've made is not being a proper husband to you, Eliza, dismissing you because I was too scared to feel or to love once more. But seeing you that night, broken and bloodied, I've never been so scared in all my life. I thought I was going to lose you before I'd ever had the chance to tell you how I really feel. Hope unfurled in her stomach, his words like a salve for all of her aches and pains. Tell me now, she murmured. Blue eyes, stormy and sharp, held hers, roaming her face. He reached out and cupped her cheek. His thumb grazed it softly. She leaned into his touch, trapping the hand with her shoulder as she closed her eyes. What I feel for you makes what I felt for Maggie nothing but a distant memory of an unpleasant experience. I can't stand the sight of her. I told her that day to stay away from us both. I don't know if she knew of her husband's shenanigans. If she did, it makes her an even more unconscionable woman. Clear blue eyes popped open once more. Tell me more, she whispered on a half smile. He picked her up then, settled her carefully back on his lap, and she curled into his touch, nuzzled against his chest as he cradled her. You blasted into my life, dragged my family kicking and screaming out of their depression. You made the community stand up and take responsibility for their deplorable treatment of Jake. You made Jake recognize his brilliance and have given him the chance to have a life of his own, to be independent. You've even forced him to admit his feelings about Sally to her. Eliza's smile grew as her eyes drifted lazily shut, his deep voice a soothing lullaby as sleep stole over her. I knew it. He rubbed his chin across her crown, pressed a kiss to her forehead as his hand rubbed her back. You made me laugh again, something that has been missing from my life too much. You're like the shining light to my night sky, and I need you like the plants need the rain. I love you, Eliza McKee. I need you to stay here with me, make a life with me, to start a family with me. She lifted her face to his, eyes half closed, and she gave him a languid smile. I need you to say all of this again tomorrow, when I'm more awake, please. Does that mean you're staying? She laid a hand on his cheek and pressed a slow kiss to his mouth. I go where you go, Logan. I love you. There's nowhere else I need to be. Logan leaned back on the couch, nestled the woman he loved closer to him, and closed his eyes. She was right. He had nowhere else he needed to be.